Welcome in as we bring you an extended version of the Deeper Dive here on Awesemo Yahoo edition of the Deeper Dive. I'm Eitan Shander. Eric Lindquist is here. Jordan is producing. We want to thank Yahoo, of course, for providing this extra 30 minutes where we are going to fully cover this 3-game slate tonight. Oh, okay, not many games on the slate. Don't worry. There's a ton of value, maneuverability. We have some injuries to focus on as well. I feel like I just saw you, Eric.
You maybe because you might have. We were talking a little Thursday night football, and now we're ready to go here with the NBA. We kind of we're men of many talents, if you will. And also, how sharp do you look, dear God?
Well, I have a job interview, funeral. This is like Shander in a suit roulette, right? Job interview, funeral, and court. That's what Jordan hit me with ahead of time.
You scheduled all three on the same day, so you don't have to change. You only have to wear the suit one time. That is a sharp play, sir.
This is the only time on any of the 3 channels that I'm on, that you'll see me like this on Thursdays, because I have a commitment that requires me to dress up in front of a camera. I can go Fire, Chip, and Eagle Scully with you earlier, but maybe it's just Yahoo. Maybe Yahoo was bringing out the sharpness in me. Do you ever think of that?
Well, I mean, that might be part of it too. I mean, it's nice to actually have a professional on this show for once. You know what I mean? You dress up, Jordan? You look the part, you feel the part. It's a nice change. You know what? It's kind of inspiring me. I did wear a suit coat for the opening of the Slate Starter podcast with Ryan. We started that back up for the NBA season. It was a weird feeling because I feel like I haven't worn a suit for a year and a half, but I'm getting married in less than a month. I bet I'm wearing a suit for that, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would think so. And unless it's one of these outdoor weddings in LA where you can wear shorts and open toe sandals. But that's, I mean,
it is, but I swear if I wore that, I might not be getting married that day. That's kind of how it works.
I think a lot of us would be in that boat, as much as people look back and think, I should have took a stand. But we'll touch on that, I'm sure, at some point over the next hour and a half, as you'll bring up wedding plans, I'm sure. But as far as tonight is concerned, now it's Yahoo, so we have to completely remind people here that we're focusing entirely on Yahoo over the next couple of minutes here. The Deeper Dive will expand at about 5:30 Eastern, but with Eric and I, we're going to look specifically at how you can get ahead, some edges that you may have with Yahoo tonight. So let's start, and we'll bounce around kind of different positions. Injury news is also going to be heavy on what we do, both in a specific position as well as maybe the ripple effect. So let's start with maybe your overall thoughts on this slate and kind of how to approach a short 3-game slate tonight.
Yeah, so we're talking Yahoo for the first 25, 30 minutes here of this show. Very excited to have them as a sponsor, and it's such a fun site to be playing on. Super easy. The salaries are just constructed a little bit differently, and so like most slates, I'm always somebody who leans on the side of stars and scrubs, and we definitely have that kind of a setup. We got everybody all this Bucks news that just kind of popped up here this afternoon. Drew Holiday, Brooke Lopez, Dante DiVincenzo, Bobby Portis, Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye, all out. So we're looking at Jordan Nwora, somebody that's just going nuts in the boom bust tool. It's going to be a big conversation point, I think, for this show, for other shows later on in our programming. And then looking at these studs, being able to differentiate. Can Luka Doncic and Giannis Antetokounmpo fit into lineups well? What are we kind of looking at? Because Bam Adebayo is somebody that's at the top of our ownership right now on Yahoo. And figuring out what to do with some of these cats, like that's really going to kind of be what makes and breaks your slate, because you kind of need to be, you don't have to be perfect, but you really have to figure out these pieces of value and how to get a little bit different from the norms, because most people are going to be building very, very similarly on this slate.
It's a great point. And it's not just what do you do on Milwaukee to take advantage of guys who are hurt, but who on Miami is going to benefit most from not having starters out there on the floor for the Bucks, or even bench guys, role players who are going to come in and play quality minutes. So Drew Holiday, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that we have 2 teams that, we haven't, so multiple teams we haven't seen, Dallas, Atlanta, but then we haven't seen the Miami team and we haven't seen the Clippers team. So there's 4 kind of unknowns as far as rotations go. And then there's going to be some recency bias with the other 2 teams. I mean, Milwaukee being one that is hard to get away from, but Golden State, I think it's very, very fascinating where some of the rostership over on Yahoo is landing. So excited to kind of dive into that with you with position by position.
Stars and scrubs. So that's kind of the theme here that will hit position by position, because one of these positions, more than one each, going through it, you're going to have a star that's going to jump out, and then another position or two. I'm sure that's where the balance is going to come paying down, if you will. Let's start at the point guard spot. And you mentioned two things that jump out. One, Drew Holiday's hurt, so he's out. We're not clearly have to factor that in now with Holiday. But the other element is recency and really having what we saw with Steph Curry versus what we expect from Luka, two guys really at the top of the slate there for the point guard spot. So if you're looking at stars defined in stars and scrubs, I would think it would start with either Luka or Steph on the point guard spot.
Yeah, it's going to be Luka. I mean, we're talking strictly stars and scrubs for me. Luka Doncic, he's the favorite in the MVP markets for just about everywhere that you look. It's just a spot for me where there's just no way around it. I'm looking at Luka. I'm looking at Giannis, and we have so much value that exists here that showed up. I think it was already value. It was kind of something where I'm looking at other paths to get away from Jordan Nwora coming into this slate, and now with everybody out, it's impossible to avoid him. So I'm going to kind of just be looking. You just lock in so many guaranteed points with those three specifically: Luka, Giannis, Jordan Nwora. It just really comes down to figuring out other ways to get different with my other spots, because you just look at the raw points that you're locking in from those two. Luka Doncic is going to be a huge part of builds. I mean, you can find ways to get to Steph Curry and up against the Clippers at home in his home opener. I think it's something that I really do want to try to get to more shares if I can of that entire game environment. But there's no doubt about it. The ceilings and the floors of Giannis and Luka, it's just far superior to anybody else on this slate.
Yeah, not even Trae Young, where I noticed that you carved that line right there. And look, there's going to be volume clearly, but the expectation for Luka and Steph based off that one game to be able to facilitate, if you can get rebounds with Curry, I don't think it's fair to expect double-digit rebounds, but all of a sudden the stat sheet becomes a little bit wider for Steph. We already know that with Luka. Is that what's holding you back with Trae Young to put him up there in that crew?
Maybe it's a personal bias, but also there's just I don't even really know how to go about.
Bias is okay.
Yeah, personal bias. Is Trae Young going to be carrying the same type of ceiling? I mean, he's $40. So he's definitely giving you a discount off of those top tier guys. Giannis 52, Luka Doncic 49. And then you're looking at Trae Young down at 40. Steph Curry kind of sitting in that mid-range between all of them. $40. I just don't really think I'm going to be landing there as much, because a lot of the value that exists down in this bottom area, this $10 to $12 kind of vicinity, specifically $13. Jordan Poole going to be a huge part of lineups today as well. Hard to get away from that kind of a number. I think with the positional element of it, my point guard spot is going to a lot of Luka, a lot of Steph. I just feel like 9% difference in rostership. It's just not enough of a gap between those top tier, those top ceilings, and those high floors, as opposed to Trae Young. Not that he's having to share a bunch of the shot attempts. I mean, he's still the guy in town there, no doubt about it. But there's at least Bogdanovic, who coming into last year, I felt like was going to really affect Trae Young's usage. It didn't really happen, but part of that was Bogdanovic fighting injuries the entire season. And so we saw some glimpses of Bogdanovic and the kind of ceiling that does exist, especially that Milwaukee series too. There were a number of times where I felt like Bogdanovic just can be a number one, can have the ball in his hands and be very, very effective coming down the stretch there. He just cannibalizes enough production for me that Luka, again, there's just no way around it. He does everything in the stats category. Trae Young, he's going to get a lot of assists, but the rebounding numbers aren't even remotely close. So I'm still siding with those upper ceilings.
Make sure you hit that thumbs up button as we see more and more people piling in here for the extended deeper dive today. The extra half hour, of course, brought to you by Yahoo. Speaking of which, see that link below. Click it, sign up at Yahoo, and we're going to give you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, which is an insane value that you could start using right away with your first deposit and paid contest entry. You're getting information, insight, you're getting plays right here, so you can do it simultaneously. You can leave our window open, click on it on another window, and be ready to go before everything locks. Imagine that. So let's move to the 2 spot, where I think there's a little bit more. Again, we're only dealing with 3 games tonight and a bunch of injuries on the Milwaukee side. There's a little bit more, I would think, flexibility here, but even still, you're not paying up. There's no real star. I mean, unless you wanted to look at Wiggins or the ceiling of Bogdanovich, but it's not anywhere near the level of star that you'd be paying up for. I'm going to guess that this would be a position you're willing to sacrifice and go a little more scrub heavy.
Yeah, this is kind of a fun position. So the other night, Jordan Poole was like lock button in the shooting guard spot, but on other sites, they're all multi-positional eligibility. The other two main ones that people think of over on Yahoo, it's still locked in positions. Obviously, you have the forward, the center spot, and then or the guard, the forward slot, and then the flex spot. So you can get the combination of players in those three. But with locked in positions here at shooting guard, Andrew Wiggins, I was always curious what those minutes were going to look like. He only played 26 minutes. He did close out that game. So looking at popcornmachine.net, that's something that, is at least encouraging there, but it's definitely an overpay to be contrarian on a three game slate. They said they wanted to limit the minutes of him and Draymond Green here. Draymond did play right at the 30 number, and Andrew Wiggins just a little bit less. So hard to kind of get up to his number there. So I'm not going to be paying $25 for him on this slate. The roster ship at 12%. Sure, if you want to try it, but I'm going to go elsewhere. Bogdanovich, I did talk about being a little bit intriguing to me. Somebody that against Dallas, I mean, this game, they've got 113 implied total. I do like kind of that $22 edge. A lot of people, though, the most rostered guy, once again, is going to be Jordan Poole. And it is so hard at $13. Not to say that that's a good case. He didn't close because he ended up banging up his ankle towards the end of that game. He looks like he's going to be good to go here. 2 days of treatment. It's early in the season here as well. I mean, not that they're going to like push him a crazy amount, but nobody in the NBA is going to be playing that 40. We don't project a single player here tonight to play remotely close to 40 minutes. Luka Doncic is at the top end at 36. So we always have to take that with a little grain of salt in the beginning of the season. Jordan Poole, far and away the best play at the position. Going anywhere else, going to Grayson Allen, also going to be a big part of my builds, and I'll play in some guard slots at $11 to save some savings. Anything else, though, is a pivot off of Poole.
Well, okay, so as far as a decent cost guy that's still in that Poole range of price, a pivot from Poole, also super low owned, if you look at our projections, as you've been referencing on Awesemo.com, and a guy that I think stands a good chance, maybe not the best on Miami, but a good chance to take advantage of a bunch of guys down on the other side. That's Tyler Hero. I don't mind paying $3 extra from Poole to Hero to take advantage of a same situation that you laid out with Allen and Poole. He's just a little bit more expensive.
I'm very curious. So this is kind of why you want to stick around too. I want to get Adam's thoughts on the addition of Kyle Lowry, and because the addition of Kyle Lowry is definitely going to change up the complexion of this entire Miami team, how we kind of break down usage, because Kyle Lowry is going to dominate the ball a lot more than I think Goran Dragic did. I think that's just kind of expressed in Goran Dragic's salary compared to somebody like Kyle Lowry, up at $28, also at the point guard position. That would be kind of a contrarian place to land. I think he makes more sense on Yahoo than he does on other sites. I believe on DK, he's just egregiously priced. But looking at this entire team, I get Tyler Hero at $16, but yeah, I would much rather even just get down to the bottom. Part of going to Poole is $13 allows me to play more Giannis, pay up for more of the ceiling. And I don't feel like I'm giving up that much. Tyler Hero had a decent enough kind of a preseason outings. I believe he put up 44 Yahoo points against Boston in their last preseason game in 23 minutes of work. 10 for 15 from the field, 5 for 6 from three. Somebody who is capable of that kind of shooting output can be a high usage player, but we haven't really seen enough of him alongside Kyle Lowry. I think that he's going to be rostered maybe even a little bit more than we're currently projecting him for. Probably going to be lighter on him and going really to the upper echelon of the position, going up to point guards and Giannis Antetokounmpo, specifically those big ceilings. And then I'll go down to $13 and $11. I'll side more with Poole and Allen at the position.
All right, before we hit the small forward spot, that guard position is open here, and I'm slating in your plays as we go, just to continue with the salary and looking at what that lineup resembles at the end. Are you going to spend with Luka already locked in at the 1 and Jordan Poole at the 2? That's a big gap that we have as far as spending is concerned. So you mentioned Giannis. I have a strong inkling that he's going to be involved in your lineup tonight. With that said, for that guard spot, are you paying up now for Steph and locking both in? Are you keeping it similar to what you said with a Grayson Allen? Can you have some sort of middle ground and go Bogdanovich, which actually I would like, even though he's only at 22 compared to a bunch of guys above him, and that return that you should get. What do you do with that guard spot?
So you have a number of ways to go. I think Lou Williams too. Everybody on a 3-game slate matters if they're going to be remotely in the conversation. We talked about that a little bit with Dante DiVincenzo being out and how it affects Pat Connaughton. Yeah. We saw some extra run for him. Part of that is Drew Holiday being out. Same thing for Nwora, where they kind of get a little bit of a boost. Even Lou Williams, projecting him for a low amount of minutes, I believe right now, Awesemo has him for 20 minutes. You take those off the floor, that makes Wright, that makes Bogdanovic, that makes, it doesn't really affect Trae Young. Trae Young's getting the same run no matter what, but definitely kind of adds some value to the rest of those guys on the Atlanta side. So I definitely want to give them a specific shout out, but at the guard spot for me, it's going to be a lot of Luka. Steph Curry, of course he has a ceiling, but for $3 more, Luka Doncic, we haven't seen him yet here, but it's basically for 4% less going to Luka Doncic. I'm just going to side with that every single time.
Let's hit the small forward spot here, Eric, and look across the slate. Again, 3 games, 6 teams to choose from, one significantly banged up, but you have a bunch of options. And at the top, Paul George and Jimmy Butler. Not sure if you're going to get to Chris Middleton at that price point. And then it drops significantly to where maybe you can, again, it's so hit or miss on how well he's shooting for Herter, but that's where you're starting to maneuver some pretty significantly less, I would say, cost options there, cheaper options that you have following Middleton. So you have a choice of one of 3 guys if you're paying up, and then you're mining value for everyone else.
So Nwora exists at the small forward position. So I'm actually going to start there and just talk about it in context of it. He's $11. I'm going to have 100% of him on Yahoo. There's just no way around it. The guy's projecting for 28 minutes. He is breaking the boom bust tool. We'll talk about him later. It was somebody that I was actually anticipating being lower on based on the Holiday news. And then all of a sudden Holiday gets ruled out. And it's like, well, all right, here we go. Flip the script on that. Currently in the boom bust tool, obviously the scoring works out differently, but he is so positively leveraged. We project him on one side at 65%, another one 75% to land in the optimal lineup. It's something similar to Yahoo as well. And I know people are going to want to try to go different places at the position. You got Paul George, you have Jimmy Butler, you have Chris Middleton, but when you have such a great value option like that, and you have such super ceilings at other spots, anything else you do, I do not want to play 25% or 36.8% Jimmy Butler at this position when you have Nwora down there coming in at 33.2%. I'm going to just jam him in every single lineup. And of course, you have that forward spot to be able to utilize. You have the flex spot to be able to utilize if you want to get shares of Butler and Paul George. But considering it's that first game right out of the gate here, I'm just gonna, you have the Dallas Atlanta game, the Milwaukee Miami game, coming up at 5, and then you've got a 2-hour gap until you get to the Clippers and Golden State game. Just play Nwora and move on with your day.
Yeah, I love it. Especially, he's not even the highest owned 3 that we have projected on Awesemo. That's going to go to Jimmy Butler. Now, Nwora is 2, so you're not fooling a ton of people. But my point being is, at last check, 33% owned. That's not a deterrent, even on a 3-game slate. I'm actually kind of surprised that he's not higher, similar to Jimmy Butler when you look at that number. But again, the only other guy that you could find that would be in that range would be, obviously Paul George is going to be there, but DeAndre Hunter is the other cheap option that people are flocking to. It just doesn't make sense. If all things are equal, why you would look to save a couple of dollars on Hunter, knowing the ceiling for Nwora is significantly higher.
Yeah, it's pure insanity for me to do anything else other than Nwora. It just stands out. And part of it is Nwora just gets things done on a basketball floor too. It becomes an opportunity cost thing for me. $11. You're spending actually $1. Whoop, crap. Hold up. I just knocked it out.
Knocked what out?
I've never done that on a show before. That was excellent. I just completely knocked out my speaker out of the entire headphone. Just knocked the whole thing over.
I didn't even see. Why don't you just have an earpiece like normal people?
Because I like my headphones. I like kind of blocking out the noise of everything else around me. Not that anything else is going on here.
The only person who could get away with wearing headphones on this entire channel is the guy who's responsible for this entire channel. And that's Alex. Okay. You start. All right. Come on. Now people are going to think that you're biting his style, man. Jordan's going to get these angry chats. Is Eric trying to rip Alex off with these headphones?
I've never done one show without these headphones in my entire life.
Is that right?
I don't know what I would do without these headphones. Yeah, these things are fantastic. Sony noise canceling. What up? Shout out to them. Not that we're sponsored by them. If they want to sponsor some shows, sounds great. Thanks, Sony. But yeah, Jordan Nwora, absolutely the guy. There's no way around it for me. DeAndre Hunter should be a meaningful part of this rotation. We're currently projecting him for 33.25 minutes. That's more minutes than Nwora, but from a fantasy production standpoint, right around 0.8 fantasy points per minute last season. Nwora, 1.13 when he was on the floor. So it's a drastic difference in fantasy production. Plus, no Drew Holiday means Chris Middleton. A lot of these other guys. I mean, Chris Middleton's the guy that I think I want to talk about the most. He's $35, and I have no idea why we're projecting him for 19%, but then for $3 more, you get to Jimmy Butler. And I think Kyle Lowry is just going to matter quite a bit. Your assessment of him with this entire basketball team is such an important talking point. Jimmy Butler can fill up a box score, but Chris Middleton, there is so much upside at $35. I think he's going to be somebody that if it maintains at 19%, I will be largely overweight too. Of course, I love Giannis. I love Jordan Nwora, but you can play them alongside Chris Middleton, and there's no problem whatsoever with it.
19%, the number as you reference. I mean, that's down there with Bogdanovich, just over Grayson Allen. And he's not even the highest guy in his position on the slate by any means. So number alone, you're going to see a ton of leverage there for sure. All right, let's keep it moving here. You mentioned Giannis for days, brother. So I imagine that he is a lock in, if not the power forward spot, then making it a spot here for the forward or the utility before we get out. But Giannis for days here at the 4, is that safe?
Yeah, we should play a lot of Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think every single show I've ever done on Awesemo, I just say play a ton of Giannis because he's the best fantasy producer on the planet. And
funny how that works.
His floor can win slates. Like his floor can be optimal so many times, and you're just never doing it wrong. And I understand wanting to take different paths in tournaments, but it's just a stand that I've always taken because it always proves to be true. I think just paying up to get the guaranteed points and trying to hit on some lower owned value, somebody that we didn't even talk about, somebody like Cam Reddish, who's at $11 as well. If you're looking for somebody who can do something from a fantasy point per minute perspective, kind of an unexpressed upside, only 0.8 fantasy points per minute, but he was just so hampered the entire season, showed up in the playoffs for little glimpses. But I'm just kind of looking at paths to just go completely stars and scrubs. So Giannis, my favorite play on the entire slate, not close.
All right, so locking him in at the 4 and looking at anybody else that could be worked in at that forward spot. And two guys that I think just to get your reaction on, they're both similar. Porzingis is 25, Collins is 21. They're not cheaper options by any means, but they're not star price either. Any interest in working either of those guys into the forward spot? We'll hit the center and get out of here.
Yeah, I'm bummed out by the rostership on Porzingis. He's at 32.75 minutes projection, man. 39%. Coming off of a playoffs where he was egregiously bad. And I mean, he was horrendous on the floor. He's still the unicorn, still over a fantasy point per minute producer, well over 1.17 last season. It got rough. It got brutal, but now $25 is just kind of a misprice for him. We're projecting him for a bunch of minutes. Hopefully he got himself right in this offseason. Him and Luka. I mean, it's a 1-2 punch. I think it can get it done. We're going to have to see something out of him here, but it looks like everybody else, he's not coming in under the radar there. I like him substantially more than Draymond Green. I don't know what Draymond Green's minutes are going to look like second time out here second game in 2 days. Maybe it's sitting just at a 30-minute cap again. That's kind of what I'm projecting him for. You can see guys start to get kind of ramped up by a minute or two. We're projecting him for 31.5, but for $3 less, you get Porzingis, just an exponentially better play. And John Collins at $21. That's really sticking out as well. Nemanja Bjelica, $12, coming off of an absolute evisceration of the Lakers, which is so weird to say. Nemanja Bjelica ended up being the guy, but he only had a 13.3% usage rate in that game. So a double-double, yes, 15 and 11 was great, but I don't know if I want to get super point chasey, but he's $12. I would rather get the $3 more to Marcus Morris to get a little bit different.
All right, my friend, let's end with your top 2 centers, the one you're getting to the most and a pivot for that center.
All right. So Bam Adebayo and Clint Capella are the absolute chalk of the position. I think their prices are wrong, 31 and 25, but I'm going to side with my boy, Ivica Zubac. He's nobody knows. He's the guy who won me my first six-figure win in DFS. It was because of a Zubac outing when he played for the Lakers. And I'm just obsessed with this guy because he's a fantasy point per minute player. He always comes in a little bit under the radar, and you're getting him at half the rostership of Capella, of Adebayo. So I'm going to kind of say him. And then his direct backup now, the guy who ended up making the team, was Isaiah Hartenstein, who I think can really get things done on a basketball floor. If he gets minutes, if Zubac gets in foul trouble, $10. I haven't really talked about some major pivots. Hartenstein is a major pivot for me on this slate. I would rather go to him as opposed to trying to decipher what's going on with this Dallas situation. Gorgie Jang as well. Special shout out to him, $10 as well.
Awesome. Appreciate you all hanging with us for the Yahoo edition of the Deeper Dive. Don't go anywhere, however, because Eric and Adam are coming your way for a full look at the slate across the board. Appreciate you all rolling with us. Make sure you click that link, sign up at us at Yahoo. We're going to give you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Thanks to Jordan. Thanks to Eric. Thanks to you. Thumbs up, subscribe. You know the drill. Don't go anywhere.
See you in a minute. What's going on, everybody? Woo! I am back. I'm now in the host chair. It's a beautiful place to be. It's where I'm the most comfortable. It's where I don't have to give you all the analysis. I have somebody else who can do that for you. But of course, I'm Eric Lindquist. This is the NBA Deeper Dive presented by Yahoo. Thank you so much to them for the 30 minutes we got to kind of lead into this show. But I'm very excited to be able to cover the whole gamut, the entire DFS slate. And we've got just the guy to help us do that. That is Adam Scher at Ship My Money DFS. He's usually getting into some shenanigans on Twitter. I'm sure he did again today, and I don't know about it. But Adam, how you doing, my dude?
I'm good. Not too many Twitter shenanigans today. I've been busy with NBA content and then trying to get hockey lineups made and then get ready for this show and all that. So not much action on Twitter, but looking forward to another basketball slate. Been a decent start to the season so far. So looking, and the slate for a 3-gamer, I think the slate's actually pretty fun.
Yeah, we usually go back and forth. I mean, you've had two pretty decent sweats to start off the season, I think, in the main tournament on DK. I know for sure. Saw you up near the top, and day one, I think we kind of knew it was going to trail off. Yesterday, both you, Rinpack, put up top 15 outings. It was nice to see. How did you kind of feel about yesterday's slate?
I felt pretty good about it. Ended up with the best Jokic team, so kind of annoyed that he just kind of had a mediocre game. But I felt pretty good about it. It was the first slate where I think late swap played a really big role. My highest owned player ended up being D'Anthony Melton, who I had, 5% of at lock, ended up with 60-something% by the time, the slate was over. I thought it went pretty well. It was frustrating. I had a ton of Tobias Harris. I had a ton of Joel Embiid. So the Sixers bench breaking that game open in the fourth wasn't great. I was under the field on Maxey. He's the only starter that got to play the fourth quarter. So, I was expecting him to be playing all of his minutes with Embiid and or Harris. Then he just... But overall, it was I thought a pretty good slate.
Well, I'm happy. I mean, it's nice to kind of get it going early in the season. I maxed out FanDuel yesterday. I kind of did the same thing that you did with Wagner. I went from having like 5% or something. He ends up starting. I'm like, 3,500, and I have a bunch of shooting guard open. All in. That ended up being all right. He almost got to 30, almost a little over 30. That's going to be a fun situation to keep track of. But of course, you guys are all here to talk about this 3-gamer we got. As we get going, hit that like button for me, hit that subscribe button as well. So, in this and all the other content here at Awesemo is going live. We'll cover Yahoo here a little later. We'll cover the Awesemo Hall of Fame because we have a ton of winners constantly. Subs just crushing it. I know I saw Peter Hanley shout out. It must be a day ending in Y. He won another GPP. What a shocker. But excited to talk about all our sub success and, of course, talking about Yahoo. All right. You ready to get going, my dude?
Yep.
All right. We got Dallas. No injuries to speak of here on this one. Plus 2.5 heading into Atlanta, 224.5. This entire game is kind of an interesting one. We know we have the Milwaukee news that kind of shook up this slate this afternoon and kind of changes the complexion of it. But let's start at the top with Atlanta. It starts with Trae Young. Looking around, he's got a little bit of a discount on every single site from some of the top tier guys, your Steph Curry's, your Luka Doncic's. How does Trae Young fit into this slate for you?
Yeah, I think Young is one of there's going to be a lot of guys on this slate, for a 3-gamer, it's going to feel like a lot at least, that are, I think, very good tournament plays. And then guys that I just don't really see in cash games, at least on DraftKings. I think that Trae Young, it goes without saying, he has a very high ceiling. Last year, he had about a 45% assist percentage, usage rate well over 30%. And he's pretty cheap, only $9,100 on DraftKings. The thing that's going to keep Young his ownership down a little bit and keep him from being someone that I think I'm likely to get to in cash is that the real superstars on the slate in terms of fantasy points per minute, your Giannis's, your Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, they're not that much more expensive than Trae Young. So even though Young is underpriced, those guys are underpriced as well. They give you more fantasy points per minute, and there's plenty of value because suddenly you have no Drew Holiday, no Brook Lopez on Milwaukee. You already had some value anyway, and now there's even more. So it's going to be easy, I think, to upgrade from Young to those guys, but that does mean that his ownership probably is going to be reasonable. Right now we have him projected at 33% ownership. That seems a little higher than I would like, but if that does come down a little bit between now and lock, I think that's a spot that I would want to go to. I don't have any problems with Trae Young. It's more so just liking some other guys a little bit more.
Yeah, so normally we start with the road team and we jump into the home team. But the main reason I brought up Trae Young is because we have to talk about him in comparison to the studs. And right off the bat, the main stud we have, the guy who's projected out the highest for us at the point guard position, and I believe just behind Giannis on DraftKings and just ahead of him on FanDuel, is Luka Doncic from the Dallas Mavericks, the MVP favorite in pretty much every single market. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but coming off of a Clippers series where he was the only one doing anything and he got nothing out of Porzingis, was relying on Tim Hardaway Jr. to be his number two. That's not going to go well in any kind of a playoff format. But what do you see out of Luka Doncic on this slate?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say real quick, I misspoke on Trae Young. I had a typo in my spreadsheet that I was looking at. We have him at 25% ownership. That's around where I think he should be. 33%. I was like, okay, well, I take this back. I don't really like it. But at 25%, I think he looks pretty good. Luka's very similar to Young to me in that I think it goes without saying, Luka Doncic is a very, very good play. It's a 3-game slate. He's one of the top raw scorers on the slate. He's one of the best fantasy point per minute guys. He averaged last season in the games that he played with Kristaps Porzingis, he averaged a little over 1.6 DraftKings points per minute. He rebounds well. He obviously gets assists, has, like a 35% usage rate in those games. But the problem is that on DraftKings, he's more expensive than Giannis. He's $600 more expensive than Curry. On FanDuel, he's a little bit less than Giannis, but Giannis is still a better per minute fantasy producer. So I think that it's another situation where in cash games, I'm going to get to Giannis first. I'm going to get to Curry first. I don't think I'm going to be able to get all three of them in. So that kind of, forces Luka out. But then at the same time, when you look at the projected ownership right now on DraftKings, 45% going to Giannis, 40% to Curry, 31% going to Luka. So, again, you are getting him a little bit of an ownership discount there. And even if he's not going to project quite as well, he still is certainly capable of beating those guys any given slate.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I love Luka on this slate. I don't know. Would you? It's weird to say, does he have a higher ceiling than Steph Curry? But I think it's kind of unquestioned that he does, right?
I think it's pretty similar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's higher, but when you factor in the difference in salary, I think it comes out being pretty close.
Okay.
It's really close. I think just, Curry, a little bit more scoring dependent. Doncic gets the rebounds, which is nice, but you're still, when you're talking ceilings, you still have those games where Curry just goes and sets a 3-point record.
Yeah. Well, there's that. Yeah. He'll knock down 15 threes and you're all set. And congratulations on the W, but also he's 40% as opposed to Luka, 31%. So the ownership, the salary, there's no way around it. We're going to be splitting hairs a little bit. But preferring, we'll kind of recap once we get through all the games, kind of where certain players are standing out amongst them. Of course, we're going to compare Steph at the end to the rest of the point guard position, but let's start working our way through this Dallas team. It's pretty interesting because Kristaps Porzingis was somebody I didn't really know what that ownership would look like coming into today. And sure enough, nobody is thrown away because you're getting an obvious discount on him. 7,100 over on DK is really, really advantageous to be getting to Kristaps Porzingis. And then, of course, 7K on FanDuel, where he's even cheaper. And we know that on FanDuel, if you're getting a discount on somebody like that, well, they're going to be an even better play over there. What are you kind of seeing out of him being the number 2 here for the Mavericks? And can you play him at this? I mean, do you want to get to the field at this crazy high ownership, knowing how bad he was towards the tail end of last year?
Yeah, I think that Porzingis is pretty clearly underpriced here. He's someone this morning I said that I thought he's the perfect example of it being really important to be able to separate how you feel about someone as, a real life NBA player, what you may think of them and their shortcomings versus what they do from a fantasy standpoint. And also being able to not, if you think someone should be better than they are as, an NBA player, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad fantasy option. Porzingis last year, for all the grief he got as far as not being as good as he should be, he still averaged 1.24 DraftKings points per minute in the games that he played with Luka Doncic. That's really, really good for someone priced at $7,100, assuming he's going to play low 30s in minutes. The one thing in his price range that is interesting is that you do have Chris Middleton playing without Drew Holiday. So that's a spot where I think the ownership should end up being very, very similar. If one of them ends up being higher owned than the other, then I'll prefer whoever the lower owned one is. But I do like Porzingis quite a bit at that price tag.
And now going through the rest of this team, I mean, it just becomes tournament darts. In my opinion, you have Tim Hardaway Jr., 6.2%, who can get it done offensively from time to time. I think there's an upside there, and it currently projected 6.2% ownership. He becomes a fascinating case study. Dorian Finney-Smith as well. just plays a boatload of minutes for this basketball team every single year. So maybe you can get there from minutes volume, because a 0.7 fantasy points per minute isn't all that intriguing, but it is a 3-game slate. Do you have a lean between those two where you want to get to more of?
Not really. They're really similar to me, just in that I think they're overpriced, but it's also a 3-game slate, and there's a lot of, popular clear-cut plays. So if you're playing 150 lineups, you typically just are going to end up, mixing in at least a little bit of those guys. If you're playing, 3 max, something like that, I wouldn't expect either of these guys to crack the lineup.
And to round it all out, of course, the center position, where they have 49 of them every single year. They added Moses Brown, which is sad because Moses Brown was kind of an exciting guy over a fantasy point per minute producer. Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber exists down there. I mean, I'm sure he'll be starting a power forward there. And, it's an interesting, well, I mean, I don't know if he'll be starting there. I mean, Kristaps Porzingis and then Powell will probably be the starter there. But do you see any kind of value to extract out of center here whatsoever?
Dwight Powell, I think, only 3,300 on DraftKings. He was starting in the preseason. I'm expecting him to start tonight. It's tough to be too confident in what the rotation is going to look like, because it's not even like you can go back and look at the games that Powell started last year, because you have a new coaching staff in Dallas. But assuming if he starts, the plan is for him to play somewhere around 24 minutes or so. He averaged about 0.8 DraftKings points per minute in his starts last year. He's not a high usage guy, but he's essentially a minimum salary center. If he's going to play around 24 minutes, he's going to project as a good point per dollar option. And then I'm not sure if you asked me about him and I missed it or not, but Jalen Brunson also, I think, a really good value here.
Yeah, Jalen Brunson's kind of fascinating. I was going to kind of finish out with him because he's 3,500. He's super, super cheap. Those minutes could be 25 or 10, and I wouldn't be surprised with either outcome.
I'd be pretty shocked if it's 10, but I mean, okay. I'd be surprised, but it wouldn't be, Jason Kidd has a tendency to surprise very frequently with his rotations. I'd be surprised.
Understatement.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. But again, like all that would need to happen is Reggie Bullock plays more than we're expecting. Mm-hmm. Sterling Brown plays more than we're expecting. It certainly can happen. I think the best guess is somewhere around 24 minutes.
Yeah, and Reggie Bullock, 4,500. No, thank you on the DK machine. Let's jump over to the Atlanta side. But first, before we do, just want to bring up the Curry promotion that we have going here. We've got 3 games. We've got plenty of time to get through everything. But if you guys want to start being able to see all the tools that we have behind the paywall, the Boom Bust tool, which is just fantastic. Can't wait to talk about Jordan Nwora over there. My God. But it's promo code Curry gets you 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Becomes a $15 value. Every single sport we have behind the paywall. MLB still going on. NHL is going strong. Jake Hari and all the guys taking care of you over there as well. They've got a 20K to first contest on DK today. Are you playing NHL, by the way, Adam?
Yes.
I am too today. I thought it would be kind of a fun deal. I didn't have to do a live before lock. I get to hang out with you and then build some NHL, NBA, and NFL lineups. Couldn't be better. And I can do all 3 super easily with the tools we have here at Awesemo. And so take advantage of this offer if you're not yet behind the paywall, so you can play all 3 and have an edge just like I will tonight. That promo is going to be good through October 25th, but you don't want to wait for that. You don't want to wait until that Monday. Utilize it for NFL Sunday. Utilize it for all the sports we have going. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Let's jump over to the Atlanta side here. We talked about Trae Young here from the get-go, and then it just becomes a little bit of an understandable, the ownership is breaking down, I think, about appropriately on every single play as I'm going through it, especially over on DK. Clint Capella, the next guy in terms of salary, 7,200. Delon Wright makes no sense why he's 7K. That's just a mistake, I think, for a guy that isn't even projected for 14, 15 minutes in this spot. But then John Collins, Clint Capella and John Collins, both priced pretty similarly. Do you have a preference on this slate for DraftKings specifically?
Not a strong preference. Collins is a little bit less expensive. I also think a little bit less expensive, a little bit lower owned. I don't think he's quite as good a play as Capella, but when you factor in the salary and the ownership, I think they're comparable. The nice thing about Capella, and it kind of applies to Collins too, but I think more so with Capella, the playing time for him is inconsistent, which is not nice, if you're talking about cash games, but in tournaments, I like it because he's a very productive player when he's on the floor. He averaged about 1.36 DraftKings points per minute last year. The issue is that he only averaged about 30 minutes per game. And what that does is it drives his price down a little bit. If you regularly were getting 34 minutes from Clint Capella, he'd be an extra $1,000 or so on DraftKings. But since on average, you're only getting around 30 minutes. It pulls the salary back. It also brings the ownership down a little bit because people get burned enough by the 25-minute Capella game that they don't really want, that they're not sticking around for the 34-minute game. But from time to time, you will see him get, more minutes than average. And one thing that I think could be at least beneficial for him tonight is that Danilo Gallinari is out for Atlanta. So when you think about that front court rotation, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like with this being the first game of the season. But if Gallo is in, it makes it easier for John Collins to play minutes at the 5 in a small ball lineup, potentially taking minutes from Jang, but also potentially taking minutes from Capella. With Gallinari out, my assumption is that the bulk of Collins' minutes are going to come at the 4, which means potentially you see something like, 33, 34 minutes for Capella, and then the rest of the center minutes going to Gorgui Dieng. You also still could see, like, Atlanta still has enough bodies. You could still see 30 minutes for Capella, 12, 13 for Dieng, and then Collins getting like 5 at center. So I'm not saying that Capella is a lock to play 33 or 34, but I think Gallo being out does make it more likely that occurs.
I agree. And then Clint Capella and John Collins on the floor. I mean, Clint Capella still has a 23.5% rebounding rate as opposed to 12.6% for John Collins. Clint Capella is just a fantasy point per minute monster. There were times he was priced up in like 10K range on FanDuel last season. I mean, it was kind of scary, the kind of upside we were seeing out of him, 2020 Moses Malone kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's ridiculously productive when he's on the floor. It's just a matter of him getting the minutes.
Correct. And so John Collins, I think, also decent enough, 6,400. Okay. I think getting a $1,200 discount on FanDuel, multi-position eligibility now over there. Interesting enough. Now let's get, go ahead.
Well, we just got Atlanta news. Lou Williams available to play. Clint Capella will have a minutes limit Thursday.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So the Clint Capella, I mean, Lou Williams obviously being in there. I mean, we have him projected for minimal minutes at best here. How many minutes do you think Lou Williams plays? Just gut feeling.
Yeah. So I had him at none.
That's a good number.
Yeah. So here's the thing with the back end of Atlanta's rotation, right? Young, Capella, Collins, Bogdanovich, Hunter, Herter, Reddish are, you assume, all in the rotation. DeLon Wright, I assume, is in the rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if Solomon Hill got run here just because of Gallo being out.
Not again.
What?
Not again. This is Solomon Hill getting minutes.
Not
the
as
bane of my existence.
I don't mean from a DFS standpoint. I just mean like in the rotation.
Right. Correct.
But you also could, just use DeAndre Hunter there behind Collins, and then that would open up minutes for Lou Williams. So I think that it basically comes down to, who gets minutes between Lou Williams and Solomon Hill. Maybe they both play, a handful. I would guess it's more likely one of them plays around 10. Either way, I don't think it matters too much for DFS. I do think the Capella minutes limit makes Gorgui Dieng a little bit more interesting in large field tournaments. Certainly not someone you're going to need to use in cash games. Just go to Dwight Powell, go to Jalen Brunson, go to the Milwaukee value that we'll talk about. But in tournaments, you're still going to get not much ownership going to Gorgui Dieng. He's a good per minute producer. It's just a matter of how many minutes is he going to play. He very easily could play 10 to 12 minutes here. But if he, let's say Capella plays, let's say he played 30 minutes, right? If they don't play John Collins at the 5, you might be looking at 18 minutes from Gorgui Dieng. If Capella plays like 26 minutes, you could potentially go 26 minutes Capella, get like 6 minutes at the 5 from Collins, and still have 16 minutes for Gorgui Dieng at minimum salary. So I am getting more interested in Dieng now that we have that Capella news.
All right. I love that call. I think he becomes fascinating. Maybe he can be tonight's Nemanja Bjelica. Good call, by the way, on that one. Opening night. That worked out well for everybody involved, which is why we should be listening to you. We're going to continue down the board here, though. DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish. That was somebody that Ryan had brought up on the Slate Starter podcast yesterday. I didn't really know what to kind of think about it. I wanted to be enthusiastic about it, and I think I was at the initial onset of it. I mean, 20 minutes? If he gets 20 minutes, do you have any interest under 4K? It's just an absolute tournament pivot.
Yeah, I mean, my interest would be, it's a 3-game slate. If you're playing 150 lineups, you get the sum. But I'm not looking at this saying, I think Cam Reddish is like a good play you should be targeting if you're playing 3 max or 20 max. You could see potentially him getting a little bit more run for defensive reasons if like DeAndre Hunter were to get in foul trouble or something. But it's just, it's a really deep wing rotation. Bogdanovich is ahead of him. Hunter's ahead of him. You assume Herter's ahead of him. there's not going to be really ball handling responsibilities for him. When you have Trae Young playing a bunch of minutes, and then you also have DeLon Wright, potentially Lou Williams. So it's more so just, using him as a cheap contrarian piece in a couple of lineups out of 150. Other than that, I don't really have interest.
Yeah. And we just got that Atlanta starting lineup too. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's one we expected, right? Yeah. Young, Bogdanovich, Hunter, Collins, Capella.
Yep, exactly what we expected. Rounding it out, DeAndre Hunter, Bogdanovich. I mean, I like Bogdanovich as somebody who can, spike some usage, near fantasy point per minute player. What are you kind of seeing out of Hunter and Bogdanovich in this rotation?
I think they're both pretty much just priced where they should be. Bogdanovich gives you the higher ceiling. He's just the better offensive player without a doubt. Does more or can do more as a playmaker. He's a better scorer. DeAndre Hunter, more of a defensive-minded player, but he's also less expensive. So I think they're both priced around where they should be. If I'm, have to lean one or the other or guess which I'm going to get more of, I think I would hope to get more Bogdanovich just because he's the one that's more likely to actually win you a tournament.
Anything else from this game for you?
Nope.
Beautiful. Let's talk Yahoo. We just got done doing the 30-minute show that I got to do with Eitan leading into it. I'm telling you, Yahoo is the place that you want to be playing. You need to be playing multiple sites. I maxed out the $3 over there today, and I'm going to play a number of lineups, winnable tournaments. And then there are so many times that they're going to have these negative management fee opportunities. They had 50K of overlay. They were basically saying, we're going to put money into your pocket to come play. And as a DFS player, it's just such a relief to have sites that are proactively helping you out to build your bankroll, sustain your bankroll, and increase winnings. And that's what you can do over at Yahoo. I absolutely love playing over there. I think you will too. And right now we have a promotion to kind of incentivize you checking it out as a new user. Head over there, deposit $10 or more, join any contest whatsoever, and you will get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You'll be able to hit up the support at awesemo.com. They'll send you an email. You'll be set up very, very quickly. And again, that's every single sport. So the Curry promotion is great, but this one is one step better. It's a full free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum for every single sport that we offer. I can't tell you enough how important it is to head over and take advantage of this promotion. For $10, getting a free month of everything. Try out the tools, and if you don't like it, you just unsubscribe. You don't continue on, but I promise you will, because we have just winners that are printing money in NFL, NBA, as this is getting going. I mean, Adam uses the tools every single day. He's already 2 for 2 in terms of sweats, enjoyable to watch, and you can do that too. All you have to do is just to make a deposit. So take advantage of that offer. And thank you so much to Yahoo for being the sponsor of the Deeper Dive here today. Really enjoy having the partnership that we do with them, and looking forward to playing over there. I'm going to be referencing some of the salaries as we go. So hopefully if you're playing over there, you're getting all the tools and information you need from us too. All right, let's head on down. We've got 2 more games to get to. Plenty of time to go. Milwaukee +2. They apparently went out and clubbed in Miami or something. I don't know. Everybody decided to be out. But Miami making their debut on this slate, 223.5 total. That is the lowest here on this slate amongst the 3 games, but probably the most intriguing because I just talked about it. Milwaukee has everybody and their dog sitting here. It's not quite as apocalyptic because you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, you have Chris Middleton, the obvious 1-2s here in this spot. What are you seeing from those 2 studs specifically on this slate?
They both look like top plays, Giannis in particular. It's just he produces at a different rate than pretty much anybody else in NBA DFS. So when you have him at basically the same price as Curry and Luka, it's going to make him just really stand out. It's not a good matchup against Miami, but I think it's important to keep in mind that the Bucks still have a 111 team total here that's tied with Dallas for the lowest on the slate, but Golden State has the highest on the slate at 116. It's not like this is a spot where Milwaukee is unlikely to score a lot of points, and the bulk of or such, a large percentage of their offense is going to run through Giannis. Increased usage percentage without Drew Holiday last season in the games without Holiday with Middleton. Slight increase in assist percentage as well. Overall, Giannis averaged, where did it go? Overall, he averaged 1.82 DraftKings points per minute in those 10 games. There's also a good chance that you see increased playing time from him here. In the 10 games he played without Holiday and with Middleton, he averaged 35.8 minutes per game, 32.5 minutes per game when both Middleton and Holiday were in. That doesn't have anything directly to do with Holiday, but it has to do with the fact that Milwaukee is less likely to blow out their opponent when Holiday is out. So this game, in this particular game, maybe that's, a little bit overstated because Miami's actually good and there actually is an increased chance that Milwaukee just gets run off the floor here. But That's obviously not the most likely scenario. The most likely scenario here is this: you get a competitive game where, Giannis in the opener, he played 31 minutes. He lost about 3 minutes to garbage time. If you get 34, 35 minutes from Giannis here, he just looks like, the top option. Middleton gets, at the very least, Middleton's ceiling increases without Drew Holiday. You expect that most, if not all, of the minutes will be staggered between Middleton and Giannis. So you're going to get plenty of time where Middleton's on the floor without Giannis. In the 10 games that he played last year where Giannis was in and Holiday was out, he averaged 1.11 DraftKings points per minute. He averaged 1.14 DraftKings points per minute when Holiday was in. So you didn't see a bump in the production, but you did see his usage rate go from about 24% to about 26.5%. At the very least, that tells you that, Middleton's getting more shots up. And when he's shooting well, he has the potential to have bigger games than he does when Holiday is in. He's also not expensive here. He would have been a reasonable play even with Drew in. So I do think that Middleton looks like a good option. Between the two, I assume I'll have more exposure to Giannis. It's just an easy slate to go stars and scrubs. I think Giannis really just blows away everyone else.
You and me, that's the same way that I see it. It's just Starsy and Scrubsy and Luka, Steph Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, pairing them with the bottom end. And let's just start here because the bottom end is Jordan Nwora. It begins, it ends, it starts. It is everything. He's the alpha and omega of this slate. Looking at the boom bust tool, normally what happens, especially on a shorter slate, is you get a piece of value that emerges like this, 3,700 over on DK, and then they just become so way too popular compared to their optimal percentage, and then there's no leverage to be had. We currently have him projected for 56.9% ownership on DraftKings. His optimal rate is 76.7%, which means he is the most leveraged player that you can roster on this slate. How do we get away from just lock buttoning Nwora here?
Yeah, I'm personally not quite as high on his optimal percentage there, but he still has one of the highest on the slates for me, and he's really, really cheap. There's not really much negative to say here. Milwaukee only has 10 bodies. 2 of those bodies are Mamukulish, Vili, and Kalatzakis, who I don't even know if I said that.
Well done, sir. Yeah, you took the burden away from me. That was so nice of you. What a team player.
Yeah. But assuming neither of those guys are playing, significant minutes, you kind of it's like having an 8.5 man rotation, basically. Mm-hmm. Jordan Nwora can play multiple positions, which is really, really nice in a situation like this. He's not afraid to shoot. Overall, last year, he averaged 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. You expect that rate to come down as he's playing more minutes with Middleton and Giannis. But at only $3,700, if you assume he's going to play at, approach 30 minutes, play upper 20s, you have a lot of wiggle room on that per minute production before you start getting into territory where he's disappointing at $3,700. The 26 minutes he played last game was a little bit fluky in that he got garbage time run. But now when you take out Holiday and you take out Brook Lopez, there's so many minutes available. It's hard to see how he doesn't play at least that same 26 minutes, if not a couple more.
Yeah, I was going to have so many points about Nwora playing 11 first half minutes still and talking about how it affected with Drew Holiday being injured and how it was out. And then he still got to close the game in garbage time for 3 minutes and 45 seconds on popcornmachine.net. And none of that shit matters whatsoever now. You just play a lot of Jordan Nwora, I think. It's impossible to get away from. Over on Yahoo, I think I talked about on the previous show, $11. Best piece of value. Play him. Move on with your day. Let's talk about the rest of this Milwaukee team because now, all right, we got Giannis, we got Middleton, we got Nwora. Well, where else are we looking to go on this team?
Everywhere else also. Okay. I mean,
just $4. Can you play $5 in a lineup today?
I don't really want to go 5 because there's so many other good plays on the slate. 4, I think. Okay, so I guess actually I'll put it this way. If you're playing 150 lineups, like I'm playing 150 lineups, I probably have more than 0 lineups that have $5. I think normally I will have less. If you're playing like a lineup or 3 lineups or something like that, I think I would rather not be using $5 because they do still have 10 bodies, even though, again, I think 2 of them are unlikely to play significant minutes. It's also not a great matchup. And most importantly, there are just a lot of other good plays on the slate. But, I'm not in 150 max. I'm not capping it. Like 5 is fine. But I think, Grayson Allen started last game, played about 28 minutes, lost almost 4 minutes to garbage time. Pretty easy to see how he could get you 32 minutes today. He's not a great fantasy option, but if you're going to get 32 minutes at 4,400, he's certainly viable. Pat Connaughton played a lot of minutes last game off the bench. He's someone that I would expect. I'm expecting him to start, but even if he doesn't, I think you can get 30 to 32 minutes from him. He's similar to Allen in that he's not a great fantasy producer, but he's also not that expensive and likely to play big minutes. And then George Hill is who I think is going to start for Drew Holiday. He started the second half last game, played about 12 and a half minutes in the second half, lost a few minutes to garbage time. Wouldn't be surprising to see around 30 minutes from Hill. He averaged about 0.75 DraftKings points per minute last year between Oklahoma City and Philly. $3,500 playing 30 minutes. That's going to look like a pretty good value.
There's nothing worse than playing a chalk George Hill. Nothing.
You said playing a chalk George Hill.
Yeah, it's the worst thing you could possibly do in life.
Yeah, it's not fun. It's
not fun. I'm going to just say George Hill, I get it. And looking at the boom bust tool, which I kind of refer to all the time for these kind of decisions, he's very flat, 34% ownership, 33% optimal percentage. 1 out of every 3 is going to show up optimal. But yeah, I mean, it's still, you're looking at some price increases for guys like Grayson Allen, but now, of course, the opportunity's there. He kind of has the lowest boom percentage out of everybody that's kind of viable here in this spot. But yeah, George Hill, it's hard for me to get away from, I think, on this slate as well. I'm going to probably have a ton of him looking at Grayson Allen. Can you give me a little bit of Grayson Allen analysis? Because this is something we're going to get to as well with the elites, I'm sure, is somebody has a nice game and now the price goes up, but the ownership kind of stays, or so does the ownership. The ownership goes up at the same time, and you're kind of looking to hit eject on that play. What are you doing with Grayson here today?
Yeah, it's from an ownership standpoint, it's definitely, the type of player that you want to pay pretty close attention to his projected ownership. Right now, we have him at about 22%. Chances of being the optimal, I think, is pretty similar as well, but he's not very good at racking up peripherals. Like last season, for example, started 38 games for Memphis. I'm using that as kind of a proxy here because most of those games you had, Morant, Valanciunas, you had some guys that are going to dominate usage ahead of Grayson Allen. Had a 16.4% usage rate, 6.6% rebounding percentage, 11.3% assist percentage. He just isn't, going to get that many shots up. He's not going to really be involved as a playmaker. He's not really going to rebound. So he's very capable of just giving you an empty stat line, but he's cheap enough where, if he just happens to shoot hot, then he can beat his salary pretty easily. So it's kind of similar to like Duncan Robinson. Obviously Duncan Robinson's a fantastic 3-point shooter, but just in terms of the type of DFS play.
My brain went to Patty Mills instantly. Just hot shooting. How about 7 for 7 from 3? Yeah. You tool.
Chris Duarte last night.
God, Chris Duarte is beautiful though. Don't you dare. Chris Duarte is. I love that. Second highest player. Oh, okay. Yeah, I love you for that. He was like number 3 or 4 for me. Chris Duarte, Oregon Duck. Let's go. Everybody made fun of me. Everybody made fun of me for that draft pick. Loving that on air. We did that NBA draft show and Chris Duarte. Yeah, I'm just absolutely obsessed with him. Watching him at Oregon. But we continue on. Before we jump over to the Miami side, hit that like button for me as well. We've got 1.8K people. We've got almost 2,000 people here watching basketball analysis of a 3-game slate on a Thursday afternoon, I guess evening out there on the East Coast. Goes a long way. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll say someone in chat asked how many minutes Jeff Teague gets. Jeff Teague's not on an NBA team.
Yeah, Jeff Teague is wasn't that Greg Ehrenberg's analysis that he was just fat? Wasn't that the deal last year? I think it was. He's like, Jeff Teague's large. Yeah. That was his analysis. Oh, I can't roster somebody who is large. And I was like, Jeff Teague is not large, especially compared to an average human being. He's a professional athlete. His life's not bad, I bet. Okay, that's all I have for that. Miami, we're going to Miami side. Hit that like button though for me. I really appreciate it. Oh, center spot. Somebody wanted to ask about center here. What is happening at center? I think it ends up being a little bit of Mamu there in the back. You have Nawara Thanasis, who might step into some sort of a role, but Giannis is probably going to play the 5 here. No?
Yeah, I would think Giannis plays the 5. I did need to mention Thanasis though. He is someone that I'm not very confident in the minutes, but I think he's ahead of a lot of these guys. He's Agreed. Ahead of Justin Robinson in the rotation. He's ahead of Mamukelashvili. He's ahead of Clyde Zykis. I don't know. I think he plays like 18 to 20 minutes, in which case he's just sort of like a mediocre play, but it's not like it would be the craziest thing in the world if, for example, let's say Mamukelashvili looks terrible again and they don't play Khalid Zykis. Like what if they play an 8-man rotation and Thanasis just plays like 26 minutes? I don't think that's the most likely thing to happen, but he's not going to get much ownership. He's only 3,200. I don't mind rolling the dice on him in tournaments.
Do you think there's a chance Mamu starts?
Chances in more than 0%. Yeah. Chances in the top 5 things I think would happen. No.
Okay, somebody just asked in chat. That was not my question, but I don't think it happens. Yeah, it's not a 0%, but not going to be likely. Obviously, he would jump to the top of the value chart at 3K in the event he's starting. He's already playing 20 minutes. I think he's viable on this slate. So
wait, how many minutes do you think he's playing?
I mean, we have him for 20 right now. Is what he's projected for it at Awesemo.
Okay, I disagree with that one.
I disagree probably slightly too. I'd have him more in like the 15 range.
I have him at 8.
You have him at 8 right now. See, where else do the minutes go? I mean, if Giannis gets in foul trouble, there's a massive amount of run, but it's hard to project something like that. Thanasis, I think, can play alongside Giannis. Giannis, I think, gets the bulk end of his minutes at the 5 tonight. But yeah, I think Mamu, probably less than 20, 15. You said 8. I mean, that's some wild disparity. But I guess you could probably say that for Thanasis too. Like, isn't there a pretty large range of outcomes for what those minutes look like?
Yeah, I just think Thanasis is ahead of Mamukelashvili in the rotation. Right. I mean, he Thanasis played ahead of him last game, and then Mamukelashvili didn't look great when he was on the floor. And this is just a game where it's hard to I think see what he's going to do. Like, I don't know. My guess is that you see more of Giannis, more Thanasis, and then I have Justin Robinson playing 16 minutes or something.
Oh, geez. Okay. That makes sense. Mamukelashvili. I literally wrote it out phonetically on my card. It's right here. Not that anybody cares. Oh, crap. Now I'm breaking stuff. All right. We're going to head over to the other side of this game, Miami, before anything else falls over on my desk. Victor Oladipo continues to be out here for Miami, and PJ Tucker joins this rotation. What a game changer. No, we're going to talk Kyle Lowry and his influence on this entire team. Probably on DK, 8,100, the largest overpay you could possibly make on this entire slate, but definitely going to affect Jimmy Butler, definitely going to affect Bam, but I love Bam. I'm a mark for this guy. I'm going to play a ton of him today. How about you?
Yeah, I think he's a really good play. I do think he's going a little bit over-owned, just in the sense of there's so many good value options on this slate, so many really, really good pay-up options. I think that you're seeing a little bit more ownership than Bam deserves, just given that, but he is one of the better just mid-range options, 7,600 on DraftKings, likely to give you 33, 34 minutes, average around 1.2 DraftKings points per minute last year in the games he played with Butler. He does everything when he's on the floor. Someone mentioned this morning that adding Kyle Lowry could have a negative effect on Bam because of his assist numbers. That's not something I'm too worried about because one, Lowry's just replacing a lot of Goran Dragic, but also, when you talk about assists with Adebayo, it's more of a bonus than anything. It's something where there's some games where he goes out there and picks up, it's just another avenue for him to have a big game, but still most of his production is coming in terms of rebounds and scoring. So it's not the end of the world if he loses an assist or two because he's playing more minutes alongside Lowry.
And then Jimmy Butler, kind of break down Jimmy Butler, a guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything. Feels like he's always somebody that I end up lower on than everybody else on a slate, but I guess it makes sense at 8,300 that he kind of fits in the mid-range of value. And if you're going to be very stars and scrubsy, maybe having some Miami Heat, some exposure, just making sure that game stays intact. I mean, Bam, Jimmy Butler's got to be another piece of builds, no?
Yeah, I think Butler looks really good at 8,300. Between him and Bam, I prefer Butler. Just a little bit better per minute producer. He's going to have the ball in his hands more. Also a little bit weaker position at small forward, I think. So even though center's not the most deep today either, but I think Butler looks really good. Also, I think going, a little bit over-owned in tournaments right now, but neither one over-owned to the point where I'm expecting to really, for that to be a reason to get away from them. Just, pay attention, make sure you're using some lower-owned guys around them.
So I didn't play a whole lot of preseason ball, but I definitely played the last 2 slates of the season just to become a little bit more familiar with where everybody was. Put in some research that day, and I saw that Tyler Hero broke that slate. We're just going to put it that way. 46.5 he had in 23 minutes against Boston, 10 for 15, 5 for 6 from 3. That's what he is capable of doing, is having some of these massive volume outputs. But 5,200 on this slate over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Tyler Hero sitting at 4,900, even more appealing possibly at that number. What are you kind of seeing from him as an option? And then is there really any kind of a need to actually, we'll just stop at Tyler Hero for now.
So Hero getting about 20% ownership right now. I think he's a good tournament play. He's cheap enough where you can still get to, studs into your lineup and get the Hero. He's not the safest option. He's still a work in progress as an NBA player, but he is capable of getting hot. He's capable of throwing up some massive games. And he's also, facing a Milwaukee team that typically does give you open 3-pointers. So someone like Hero, Duncan Robinson, it sets up as a good matchup for him as well. But Robinson doesn't give you the same sort of, peripheral upside or just usage upside that Hero does. Hero's going to Hero's going to go out there and look to get shots. Robinson's going to kind of just shoot when Jimmy Butler allows him to touch the ball. So you get just a higher ceiling from somebody like Hero. I think that at his ownership and price tag, he looks like a good tournament option.
When Jimmy Butler allows him to touch the ball. That's the best way of putting it because it's so vivid. We all know Jimmy Butler can be a little bit of a difficult guy on the basketball court, but also very, very good. And I miss him on the Timberwolves, even though that did not go well. Duncan Robinson was kind of the lead in I wanted to make there because Duncan Robinson, never going to project out well, 13%, but man, the 3-point upside is absolutely outrageous. Just got paid the bag in the offseason, 5 years, $90 million, highest contract for an undrafted free agent. I mean, that is just fantastic stuff. What a great story. I like him as a person. I don't like him as a fantasy asset. Do you have any interest in getting to him today?
Not outside of just the, relatively low owned tournament flyer. If you're playing 150 lineups, I think it's a good matchup for him. Like he gets open looks here, but it's just so tough with Robinson because he doesn't rebound. He doesn't get assists. He doesn't really do anything except shoot threes. He shoots threes insanely well, but his game, like he's just a much, much, much better NBA player than he is NBA DFS player, kind of like teammate PJ Tucker.
I was gonna say over under 0.5 fantasy point per minute rate for PJ Tucker to finish out this season.
I have him at 0.49 for today's game. So.
It's so good. He's just the absolute worst, greatest shoe collection ever. Worst fantasy asset on planet Earth. Not even close. Anything else from the Miami Heat to kind of round this one out?
Just a quick mention. I saw somebody say it in chat, but basically everything I said about Gorgie Jang, at least to some extent applies to Dwayne Dedmon, where Bam's minutes are certainly more secure and you expect Bam to play more minutes than Clint Capella. So you don't have quite as easy a path to getting 18 minutes as Jang does. But if Bam gets in foul trouble or something weird happens, Dedmon is a good per minute fantasy producer at 3,700.
Oh, somebody champ grind. He's a little butthurt, I guess, because golf isn't going well for him or something. But I got to say, I said don't play CT Pan, and he's in dead last. So how about that at like 25% ownership?
What is
Have
this
fun
poll?
with that
like
one.
who on this slate am I a homer for?
What? I have no idea. Why are you?
Oh, there's a poll in chat that says who's the bigger homer, you or me?
Gee, I wonder what that's in reference to. We're going to move on. Jordan Klein just trolling Eric Lindquist every opportunity he can in life. You know what? This isn't trolling. This is just what it is. This is the Awesemo Hall of Fame, baby. If you guys want to get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, it's a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Finish in the top 3 of any contest and hit up Awesemo HOF on the Twitter sphere. We got some guys that are absolutely showing out here. I'm going to wait for it to pop up on my screen. Is there a way that I can see it on yours, Jordan Klein? Oh, look at that. I'm going to kind of enlarge that. Here we go. Oh, man. Big Daddy, 7420, 60K screenshot. But again, download that Awesemo profile pic. Throw it into your profile on DK, on FanDuel, on Yahoo. Finish in the top 3 of any of these major contests, and you get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's as easy as that. You just tweet it to Awesemo HOF. We'll continue scrolling through some of these. Man, it is good stuff. It is absolutely good stuff. We've got, what is this? $2,000. That's a W. I like seeing W's in the NBA. I mean, it's crazy how many of these screenshots right out of the gate for NBA season. It's just going so well. That's in the stretch for P-Raz Racing. Congratulations to him as well. And then, oh God, it's a day ending in Y. I said Peter Hanley, P Hanley 214. I mean, come on, guy. Just every single sport constantly. I think he made a deal with the devil. He sold his soul, and now he's the greatest DFS player ever. Congratulations, Hanley. You're the man. And then I'm at a loss of words right now. I'm assuming is what that is intended to be, but 62K. That is quite the screenshot. Captain Henry, that'll definitely do it the other night. So everybody, thank you so much for tweeting to us here. Just to round it out, we've got one more screenshot here. I believe that's a Fantasy World Football ticket over on FanDuel for Mangler. Oh, we've got 2 more. Mangler, congratulations on the W. NBA, it's nice to punch those tickets early in the season. Wish I could do such things, but we're two days in. I'm not panicked here yet. And then we've got Paul P19V1. That's a W. We've got that's 3 screenshots right around 1 for Showdown, 2 for the main, or 1 for the main slate, 2 for different showdowns. I mean, that is just fantastic stuff. Sham God to round it out. Congratulations to you, my dude. Love seeing these screenshots. Love seeing everybody having success with the tools, with the analysis. Can't wait to see you all there. All right, we got one more game to get to. Plenty of time, 15 minutes. I should be able to get there in time for Greg and LaMarca making his live before lock debut. Excited to see that. Hope you all are too. But let's get to the Clippers making their debut, plus 3.5 at Golden State, 228. We're going to have the tale of one team where everybody thinks they have a known quantity in Golden State based off of the first game. It was one game. Let's all settle down. And then the Clippers. Of course, there's no Kawhi Leonard, no Nicholas Batum, no Serge Ibaka, no Keon Johnson, which I guess matters too. All of them are going to be out for tonight. So let's start with the one guy that you have to discuss on this Clippers team whenever Kawhi is out, Paul George.
Yeah, he's normally someone that I get a ton of when Kawhi is out because his production goes up as you would expect. His usage rate goes up a ton. The issue here, or slight issue at least, is that he's priced for Kawhi to be out. Like, not to say he's overpriced or anything. 9,700, I think, is still a pretty good price tag for him, but he's really close to Giannis and Curry and Luka. And, George with Kawhi out, you're talking about, around 1.35 to 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. When you look at Luka, you're talking 1.6 DraftKings points per minute. When you look at Giannis, you're talking, 1.7 to 1.8 fantasy points per minute. So you kind of just need a bigger gap between them in order to prioritize George. So that kind of puts him in that same tournament category as Trae Young and Luka, where I love Paul George. I think he's got a really, really high ceiling. I think that his ownership is going to come in a little bit lower than some of those other guys. But also I prefer those other options when I can get to them.
Oh my gosh. Well, everybody knows my association with Paul George. Maybe you don't, but yeah, good to be back NBA DFS, but we got all of that trounced by a super chat from Tony, dropping a 50 spot in the super chat. Thank you so much, my guy. That is way too kind of you. He says, "Hey boys, just wanted to say thanks for some life-changing money. I'm the guy who took down the 60K on opening day. You guys put me on the right path." Dude, that is as good as it gets. 60K. What a nice number. Congratulations to you, first of all. Thank you so much for the love back to us. That's as good as it gets. You have nothing to add.
I answered it. I responded in chat.
Oh, you did? Oh, well, you're a stud. Okay, well, that's great. Just putting you on blast. No big deal. Just putting my co-host underneath the wagon, just like Greg Ehrenberg does to me on the daily. It's okay. Let's go and talk about the rest of this Clippers team. Some of the guys, specifically Marcus Morris, is somebody that really had to carry a lot of the offensive burden when it came to the playoffs here. Once they lost Kawhi Leonard, Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe. God, that's going to be a fun conversation to have. I hate both of them with an ungodly passion. It's ridiculous. What do you kind of see out of these other scorers, guys that are coming in with no ownership here on this team before we get to some of the value pieces?
Yeah, pretty much seeing them just as, contrarian pieces you can use in tournaments, not guys that I'm looking at in cash games. But there is still a path to success for guys like Jackson and Bledsoe and Morris at their respective price tags. It's not a particularly likely one. I think they're a little bit overpriced, or at least correctly priced. And there's plenty of underpriced players on this slate. But whenever that happens, you're going to get ownership coming down as well. And you're still, they're still going to score a lot of fantasy points from time to time. So use them in, lineups where you need a low owned piece. Don't, but I'm not planning on, building around them or anything like that.
Oh, $20 Eric Bledsoe on Yahoo isn't a staple of your lineups. Yeah, I'm going to probably pass because I would rather, I don't know, do literally anything. So that's over with. That conversation's done with. I have nothing to add to that vicinity. Yes, Ivica Zubac. Let's talk about him. He's my favorite center play on the day in tournaments. 23%. Just basically a 1 fantasy point per minute player, and I'm obsessed with him. He's behind the biggest DFS win of my career, so I'm extremely biased. What do you see out of him with 23.1% ownership over on DK today?
I think he's risky, but I think he also has a really high ceiling. He averaged about 26 minutes per game as a starter last year. He averaged 0.94 DraftKings points per minute in those games. If you get that out of him at 5K, or 5,100, that, looks good. It's he's like Tyler Hero, where he's at a price point you're still gonna be able to get studs into your lineup. He certainly has the ability to go get you 30 plus DraftKings points. The concern that I have is that Golden State plays small, so you potentially there's no reason you can't get lineups where you have Morris / George at the 5, and you're getting more minutes for like playing Jackson, Bledsoe, Man alongside each other, and then George, Morris. Like that lineup works perfectly fine here. It wouldn't be surprising at all if that's the closing lineup. So that's my concern. But 3-game slate, 20 to 25% ownership on Zubats, definitely worth having. But again, I just think that it's a situation where the playing time is volatile. There's no real reason that you can't just get more minutes for Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, Justice Winslow at the expense of centers.
And he's 4,200 on FanDuel. I know you're probably not playing FanDuel. Is that the worst price tag ever?
That's a pretty crazy price tag.
I'm going to play so much of him over there. Oh, Zubats, please play well. There's that. Let's talk Marcus Morris now, just to round it out. Or no, we already talked about him. Isaiah Hartenstein is the guy I want to talk about. He's actually pulling some ownership at 3,700, 10.8% on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, a little bit different there, 19%, a little bit higher around at 3,100. I see a path for a guy who 1.18 fantasy points per minute last season. We know the kind of upside he has had going back to the Rockets, going back to pretty much any situation that he's been in from now until forever. If he gets minutes, he can do it. Do you see him being the backup 5 here? And at that ownership, which is not a zero number, 3,100, what are you looking at doing with him?
I expect him to be the backup 5. I just don't know exactly what that means in this game. I think like if you get 12, 13 minutes from Hartenstein at 3,100, he's still playable. He still can do damage. But like you said, he's projected to get ownership as well. It just wouldn't surprise me at all if you're getting a lot of small lineups here. You have Justice Winslow who can play multiple positions. You have Luke Kennard that can play multiple positions. You have Terrence Mann that we know that they like. These are all guys that can take minutes away. Even like Amir Coffey, Brandon Boston. They have bodies if they want to run small lineups here. So that's my concern. I'd be a lot more interested in Hartenstein if he wasn't getting ownership, but I fully agree that there's a path to success for him. Mm-hmm. What makes me hesitant, in addition to just that there's a lot of different ways this front court rotation can go, there's also similar cheap backup center options. You have Gorgie Jang, you have Dwayne Dedman. Not that they are likely to have tons of success either, but I don't think Hartenstein's some like locked in guy that is like, that can't fail.
Agreed. And here's probably the right way to ask this. And this is something that I've been debating what to do with this team. Are there any groups that you would build in terms of the way that you do see this number, whoever's going to end up playing the 5? Like they go small here. You're starting off with Looney. I think that's pretty locked in for Zubats. Draymond could play some 5 there. And then they went to Juan Toscano-Anderson quite a bit there. On the other side, Hartenstein seems like he'd be all right to have out on the court in that situation, but they have gone to Marcus Morris Sr. I will say the one thing that I think maybe gives me a little bit of hope for Hartenstein, possibly out projecting the minutes you have for him, is Marcus Morris was very limited, didn't end up playing in the preseason whatsoever, mainly because they're trying to save him up for the regular season. I don't know if he gets to the amount of minutes. We've got him for 27.25. I wouldn't even be surprised if he played 24, and maybe that is a direct benefit for Hartenstein. So would you possibly build a group to kind of to find ways to get him in at 3,100?
Yeah. So the way I typically think about groups is thinking in terms of closing lineups. And so like with the Clippers, you assume that George, Jackson, and I mean, this is even pretty volatile, but like George, Jackson, Bledsoe, Morris, and then like one of Zubats, Mann, probably not Hartenstein, but Hartenstein, Kennard, Winslow. Right. But because there's volatility here, I think and it's a 3-game slate. You could even go to 2, but like, I don't think I would want more than 2 of, I don't want Zubats and Hartenstein together. And I don't think you want more than 2 of like Zubats, Mann, Morris, Kennard, Winslow, basically.
Okay. And that's kind of the last guy to talk about with Justice Winslow, who, when healthy, can get things done. I mean, 0.85 fantasy points per minute, it's and whatever, but somebody that definitely has some upside that we have seen from time to time. I know there was a slate he absolutely destroyed where he played 38 minutes towards the end of his tenure there, with Memphis and such. Justice Winslow, do you have any interest in him? How do you kind of differentiate between him, Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, the rest of these guys who are pulling actual ownership?
Winslow is one of my favorite low-owned tournament plays.
Mine too.
I don't mean favorite in the sense that I'm really confident he plays a lot of minutes or that I'm really confident he does well, but just favorite in the sense of I think his chances of success are being drastically underestimated while other guys are being overestimated. Luke Kennard's a good value at 3,300. I don't think there's a really big gap in terms of chances of success or projection between Kennard and Winslow. We've already talked about how Hartenstein looks really good potentially, but you also could just see Winslow take minutes away from him at 1/5 the ownership. There's just, I don't know. There's a lot of ways I think for Winslow to get there, and that's not really reflected in his ownership right now. The fact he can defend, pretty much every position, I think, is really beneficial here in a game like this. There's just so many ways for him to get on the floor and outperform, what people are expecting him to do.
And he can handle
and also he was playing a lot of minutes in the preseason. So I think there's like a natural tendency with Winslow because it's just been so long since we've gotten like a healthy Winslow that is on a team that wants to use him. There's like a tendency, I think, to just think that like he's not capable of playing minutes. He's fully capable of playing as many minutes as they want to use him for.
And he can handle the ball. He can do things offensively. I just like Justice Winslow going back to his, Duke days. He was an enjoyable player to watch there. Miami, whenever he was healthy, Memphis, not so much, but yeah, Justice Winslow is a player that I've always enjoyed. And there's just a ceiling there. There's no question. I mean, you see that 38 minutes, 49.25 fantasy point outing with nobody else there at the end of that season, just complete garbage game where they punted it. So Justice Winslow can definitely do things on a basketball floor. Let's round this out. Go ahead.
I'll say, I think if you wanted, you made the Bielitsa comparison to somebody earlier. I think out of like everybody on this slate, if you want the player where it's just like after his team's first game of the season, you look completely differently at his role. I think Winslow is that guy.
I love that call for both of us. So we just increased his ownership by 2%. Not that we have that power, but yeah, I think we probably do. Let's go to the Golden State side where you did have that Bielitsa call. Also, congratulations on that, dude. What a nice way to start off the season. You're in fine form already, even if you don't act like it, even if you don't act like a professional, you are. So congratulations on that. And congratulations, because I think it helped everybody in chat, including myself. Great call by you. He looked awesome. But also, let's start at the top end. Steph Curry, where does he fit into the landscape of the studs on this slate?
He's my second favorite pay up option behind Giannis, but I like him more than Luka where he's cheaper. I have him ahead of Paul George. Curry benefits. He's always really good, obviously, but he benefited last year when he played without James Wiseman. He benefited big time when he played without Kelly Oubre. The entire team did. Now, obviously, he's not playing. Oubre is whatever team Oubre is on. I know he played last night, Charlotte, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Wiseman is out. And so you have Curry, when he played last year without either of those guys on the floor, he had a 35.8% usage rate. In the games he played without Wiseman, it was up to 37%. He's just going to get up so many shots. He's such a good, efficient shooter. And then, obviously he's involved in he gets assists. He gets, enough rebounds too. So I absolutely love Steph Curry here. Second favorite pay up option behind Giannis.
Triple-double without shooting the ball well. He's going to shoot the ball better. I promise you that. It's there's a ceiling there for sure, but I might like Luka a little bit more slightly just because, Steph Curry coming off a triple-double, I think that might inflate a little bit of what I look at him. He has a ceiling as well. They're both fantastic plays. Maybe Giannis, Luka, but Steph Curry, I'm not going to make an argument and say that isn't a fantastic play because it absolutely is. We saw Wiggins and Draymond Green limited under 30 minutes. I guess Draymond exactly at 30 minutes, 29.58 that he played in that game. What's your interest level in them in this mid-range on a slate where we are going Starsy and Scrubsy?
Yeah, not too interested there. They had said they were going to be limited. Then you got Green at 30 minutes. You had Wiggins at, I think, 25 or 26. He dealt with some foul trouble as well. But ultimately, I think you're getting 30, maybe 32 here. It's just not enough for me to really want to get to those guys. Golden State in general, I think, is one of the, with the exception of Curry, Golden State's one of the, I think, most appropriately priced teams. Mm-hmm. And then we also saw them. We also saw an 11-man rotation last game, which is not that appealing either.
I would argue the Hawks are about the most perfectly appropriately priced team on this slate, but then Golden State would probably be number 2 for me. Dallas, I don't have any idea. I think they're just over inflated, I guess, but yeah, appropriately would probably be Golden State number 2 for sure. But we have 2 pieces that we do need to talk about here. I mean, we'll round out the entire game, but Jordan Poole is carrying a bunch of ownership. He's now seen that price increase, rightfully so, $4,800 to $5,500 over on DK. He remains $13, so just play him over on Yahoo. But what are you seeing from Jordan Poole coming off of a game where he didn't close, but that was partially because of injury?
I'm expecting him to play more minutes tonight. So the rotation was just weird in general. Yeah. He didn't close the first half either. And then he didn't close the second half, I'm assuming because of the ankle. The way I put it with Josh this morning is there's going to be games where Poole only plays 25, 26 minutes. But I think that there's going to be a lot more games over the next month or, at least until Klay Thompson comes back, where Poole plays more than 25 minutes than he plays less. I don't think 25 is his average. I think his average ends up being, 28, 29, 30, somewhere in there. And then I also really like the rotation they ran because they did stagger Poole and Curry. That's a big deal for Poole. Someone that we know wants to go out there and shoot. Only going to get so many shots when you're out there with Steph Curry, but running that second unit, he's going to be able to get his shots up there. You assume he's going to play around 12 minutes or so without Curry. So, 40%, 35, 40% of his playing time without Curry out there. I think that he's a good play. I also think the ownership is there. So he's someone where if I have a chalkier lineup around him, I really like the idea of using like Tyler Hero or something like that. But if let's say I'm using Gorgie Jang instead of Hartenstein, maybe, going to Jordan Poole, I think makes a lot of sense in a lineup like that. Just kind of the first example off the top of my head. But I think the ownership's there on Poole. I think he's a high upside play. I think he's a good player. I also think he's, owned about where he should be.
And your boy Bjelica, got to talk about him to round it out here. Bjelica, any interest?
I'm less interested today, I think, just because the price tag came up substantially. I think he was 3,400 last game. Now he's 4,600. And it is a situation where, you don't want to let like confirmation bias get too far ahead of you. He only shot 7 times. He made 6 of his shots. That's obviously not going to happen all the time. Sometimes he's going to take more than 7 shots too, but it's not like he had some crazy role where he was, shooting 100 times. He was 4th on the team in potential assists behind Curry, Poole, Curry, Draymond, and Iggy. That was, good to see. That was part of the reason we liked him, was his playmaking abilities. All that's still true, but it's just much different when you're talking about a $4,600, sort of 24-ish minute role player compared to $3,400. So I'm not expecting to get to much Bjelica here.
Anything else from Golden State for you?
Damian Lee, dart throw in large field tournaments at 3,600. Same really can be said for Iggy. They're just kind of guys in that mold where, if people are going to play Luke Kennard or people are going to play Hartenstein or whatever, I really just, the way I see this slate is I really, really like the mid-range players that are getting ownership. I really, really like the expensive players. I think that where I'm most likely to be contrarian is on these cheap guys where you're kind of guessing what the rotation is going to look like. They're not actually that good in terms of the NBA. I'm more likely to just, try and get to some low-owned guys there and make pivots there than I am to say, people are playing Steph Curry, I'm not going to play him. Or, people are playing Giannis, I need to play somebody else. Like, I think there's a much higher path to success rolling the dice on some of these lower-owned Damian Lee, Iggy, Gorgie
Justice Winslow, baby.
Yeah, Justice Winslow, exactly.
Yeah, that's our guy. Looking forward to it. Adam, thank you so much for all the analysis. Really enjoyed it. That's the Deeper Dive, everybody. Now, we have Live Before Lock, so don't go anywhere. That's Greg and Mr. Lamarca making his Live Before Lock debut. Don't go anywhere. And then NFL Showdown starting at 7:35. We'll see you later. Take it easy.
Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show, and I'm excited for a couple reasons. Number one, first show that I'm hosting on Live Before Lock this season. I've only been an analyst so far. Also, I'm joined by my guy, Matt LaMarca, who everywhere that I've ever worked, I've kind of tried to make sure that Matt LaMarca is involved in someplace. When we worked at DraftKings, he was there. Now over at Awesemo, he's here also. You guys should be following him on Twitter at Matt LaMarca. Easy enough, right? That's his name. Also, what he is on Twitter. You can see his Twitter handle on the screen. So yeah, exactly. I ended up throwing DFS into my Twitter handle, and now I kind of wish it was just my name because that would have been easier. But Matt, happy to have you on board, and we're going to be talking the 3-game NBA slate. How you doing today?
Well, first, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be associated with Awesemo. I think that this website does some of the best stuff in the business, so I'm happy to be a part of it. And my day's been good. You know, a nice 3-game slate. It's a fun slate. I kind of like smaller slates. They let you get a little bit more creative, I think. You know, you kind of got to think about those 8th, 9th, 10th men in the rotation as opposed to yesterday, 11-game slate where you're not really needing to go as deep. So it's a little bit of a different type of night, but I really enjoy these small slates.
Yeah, it's definitely, I like 2-game slates, a little too small for me. So the opening night slates, like this is garbage, but I'm kind of obligated to play a bunch of action. It's the first night of the season. But, 3 games, a little more manageable. We have more decisions to make. There's a little more discussion points. Also, we got some people recognizing you from the old DK Sims in the YouTube chat, a little bit of a crossover between those two things. So we're going to be talking a little position by position. But first, I think the big news on the slate that's really going to impact most of our lineups is going to be the Milwaukee Bucks situation. I don't really expect we're going to get too much other key news as we go along here. But I just want to ask you before we start breaking into who we're really getting exposure to position by position. In terms of the Bucks, first, what do you expect their starting lineup to be today?
Yeah, it's a good question. They could put Mumu Kelashvili into the starting lineup. I'm not sure if they'll necessarily go with that route. Maybe George Hill moves in and you go with a Hill, Grayson Allen, Middleton, Antetokounmpo, and then maybe like Noir. I don't know, or Connaughton, excuse me. Like it's gonna be interesting to see. I think I would probably put my money on George Hill starting. He's been with the team in the past. He's kind of just like a natural fit in that Drew Holiday type role. That's where I'm seeing, and they play a little bit smaller than usual. But what do you think?
So also with Brook Lopez being out, I kind of think they just go small ball. And I mean, not that it's that small, but with Giannis starting at center. And I think that we're going to see Pat Connaughton and George Hill inserted into the starting lineup. We could also see Jordan Nwora in there. But whether Nwora starts or comes off the bench, he's going to be a chalk play. But I think for good reason also. I mean, if you look at the tools we have over at Awesemo.com, in our boom bust tool, we have Jordan Nwora as the chalk play on DK by a really wide margin on this slate. I'll look at the most recent run of ownership. We have him projected for 56.9% ownership. However, we have him landing in the optimal lineup on DraftKings 76.7% of the time. So we're kind of talking about good chalk, bad chalk. Based on that information, I'm kind of thinking whether Nwora comes off the bench or starts. I think he's the best value play on the slate. There's not really too much ownership that's going to deter me when we have him projected to be in the optimal lineup 3/4 of the time. But I'll ask you, are you on the same page with Jordan Nwora as good chalk, and how much exposure you're willing to get to him?
100% with you on Jordan Nwora being good chalk, and probably 100% in terms of Jordan Nwora in my lineups. Like it's one of those things where we're not going to get a ton of leverage unless we lock button him or go underweight, and I'm just not willing to go underweight. So I think that regardless whether he starts, whether he comes off the bench, the guy's like a bona fide offensive weapon. He's kind of proven that. I mean, it's only one game this season, but even last year, he was really good fantasy points per minute wise when he got in the game. I think that just with the salary, with the injuries, the Bucks also had 4 guys out on opening night. So they're like really thin. There's just not a whole lot of avenues where I see Nwora busting. So I'm fine with just the old lock button Aruski on him.
Yep, I don't have an issue that even if you're playing 150 lines, like I'm not getting quite that aggressive, but I still think there's no real issue with that relative to some of the numbers we have on the site. And he rates out as the top leverage play on the entire slate, even though he's projected for crazy ownership on FanDuel and DraftKings. Even FanDuel, where he's a little bit more expensive, 4,300, project for 42% ownership. We have him landing the optimal lineup 63% of the time. So he looks massively under-owned to me on both FanDuel and DraftKings. With chalk plays, sometimes the ownership, even as high as it is, might not quite be enough. So any other takes on the Bucks in particular in that situation? If not, we could move on over to just going position by position.
Yeah, I mean, it's just they're going to be the chalk tonight, even though they have a little bit of a tougher matchup than they had on opening night. They're underdogs for the second straight game, but this time road underdogs as opposed to home underdogs. I think the question is just, you have to kind of ask yourself, how aggressive do you want to be in targeting some of their players? I think we talked about Nwora. Giannis certainly is going to be up there from an ownership perspective, but do you want to then dive into some of the other plays that are on the Bucks? Do you want to go, 4 wide, maybe a game stack type situation? I don't know. I think that's really the big question that we have to ask.
Yeah, and by the way, we did just get an update in our premium Discord channel from the news god himself, El Negro Loco. The Bucks head coach Mike Budenholzer said they're still figuring out starters against the Heat tonight, but the lineup will be released soon. So whatever the time stamp is on that, we should know hopefully before the show ends who's going to be starting, and then we'll circle back on the Bucks and figure out what we're going to be doing with that information. Also, guys, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and here's why you should be liking. Because this is Matt LaMarca's first show. We want to boost his ego and make him feel good like he belongs here. So like the video, guys, show him some love, and it goes a long way towards helping us in the channel as well. But all right, let's get into some of the position by position breakdown here. And starting with the point guard position. And this is a little bit harder to do this year, going FanDuel and DraftKings point guard, shooting guard position by position, just from the standpoint of last year, there was single position only on FanDuel. It's kind of easy to say, like, all right, these are the guys we're going to designate at certain point guard, shooting guard. So maybe going forward, to make it a little less confusing, we'll say guards, forward, centers. But at least for today, with only being a 3-game slate, I want to ask you, on the high end of the point guard position, I think we should start with the debate between Luka Doncic and Steph Curry. Both of them are going to be very popular pay-up options, not quite as popular as Giannis. But between Curry and Doncic, do you have a lean in terms of which one you want to get more exposure to?
Yeah, I think Curry for sure on DraftKings. He's a little bit like the price discrepancy is a little bit larger there. Actually, it's roughly the same. But I just think Curry grades out as a slightly better value for me when you factor in the bonus for 3-pointers. He's a fine play. He was really good against the Lakers on opening night. The Clippers, matchup wise, not really sure how they're going to be this season. They don't have the same defensive presence that they've had in the past without Kawhi Leonard. This could end up being like a pretty solid matchup. So I think I would give Curry the edge there versus Luka, who, as much as I love Luka, the Hawks were one of the slowest teams in the league last season. They do have, basically their best defensive players in the lineup. There were times last year where they didn't have DeAndre Hunter, and we saw how effective he can be on the defensive end of the court. I don't think that they will throw Trae Young at Luka very much. Or at least I would hope not if you're fading Doncic, but I think I give Curry the edge here. Doncic probably has a slightly higher ceiling, but I think Curry is the better value.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. I have Luka projected for slightly more fantasy points, but I'm still landing on more exposure to Steph Curry. And it's because he's $600 cheaper on DraftKings, because over on FanDuel, we also have a slightly cheaper salary on Steph Curry, where it's $1,000 cheaper. And I think you hit on a key point there. And it's something that I always find very difficult to project at the start of the season. When a team has made massive changes, I don't really know how to project that from a matchup standpoint. And obviously, the Clippers defense this year, no Kawhi Leonard in the mix. It's reasonable to assume they're going to be a worse defense. I also had Patrick Beverley on the team, who, I think at this point in his career is maybe a little bit overrated as a defender. He's certainly going to give them, I think, better defense than they will normally be getting out of somebody like, say, Reggie Jackson, who's going to play more minutes this year. And so I have to just kind of look at that and assume this is a better matchup for Steph Curry than what some of the numbers might indicate. Because to open the season, first game for the Clippers, I'm kind of, from a projection standpoint, just kind of defaulting to this is how this team performed last year defensively. But I kind of went in and manually gave Steph Curry a little bit of a projection boost just for that reason, not knowing what to make of the defensive matchups. But yeah, same page as you. I'm getting to Curry more than Doncic. But is it still a situation where you're getting to both of them in your lineups at a decent clip?
It's an interesting construction. If I'm going with the two studs, I want one of them to be Giannis. But again, that's going to be the default lineup construction for, I think, most of the people who pay up for two studs. So there probably won't be a ton of Doncic Curry lineups out there. It's interesting for sure, but I won't have a ton of that combination tonight.
Let me see if I could actually sort by this and see how many of my lineups that have Steph Curry also have Luka Doncic. A very low number. It is not very many. So yeah, it was definitely something that was a little harder to get to. I do have Giannis in more of my lineups than I have of Steph Curry or Luka right now. So yeah, I don't have very many combinations of Luka Doncic and Steph Curry. It's less than 5% of them for me. But yeah, I think that still I agree with you. Giannis overall, my favorite spend up option. Steph Curry 2 for me. Luka Doncic at 3. But then where does Trae Young get into the mix for you? Because I'm finding it a little bit difficult to get to him just from a standpoint of there's so many guys to pay up for on the slate. And a lot of the best fantasy producers in the league, when we have Giannis, we have Steph Curry, we have Luka Doncic. If I'm already saying that I'm preferring some of these other options to Luka, I'm just finding it kind of hard to get to Trae Young. So I'm underweight to him in a way that I'm not really comfortable with. But how are you handling Trae Young relative to some of these other stars?
Yeah, I wish that we were getting him at a slightly cheaper salary or slightly less ownership. But the way that things kind of shake out, we have him with a leverage score of 2.2, right? So he's in the optimal lineup using our boom bust tool 24.6% of the time, projected for 22.4% ownership on DraftKings. So they're saying the field is going to be slightly underweight on him, but I don't see it as enough of a value where I want to actively try and use him as a contrarian option. I think that there are some other spots that I'm more willing to try and, fade some of the chalkier plays. Like I would rather go with Curry and then save 1,000 or so, 400 even elsewhere, than try to go with Trae Young and get the extra savings at another position.
Yep, I'm on the same page with you there. Not somebody who I'm quite getting to my lineups, even though it's only a 3-game slate. You just kind of get to a point where you have to make the cut somewhere, and Trae Young just ended up being in well below the field for me in terms of exposure relative to what the field has. But now I want to back down a little bit and get to the real cheap end of the pricing tier, because I think George Hill is somebody else who is a pretty important talking point on this slate. And weirdly, I'm not really getting to him on FanDuel at a 3,600 price tag, but because of the added flexibility we have on DraftKings with the guard spot and the utility spot, he becomes a guy who's in a whole bunch of my lineups, even though he's at $3,500 on DraftKings, only $100 difference. I still just found him easier to get into lineups over on DK, where he has point guard eligibility, he has shooting guard eligibility, also, like we said, to play him in the guard and utility spot. What do you make of George Hill as a value play for this slate, who we talked about the Bucks starting line for? I assume he will end up starting for Drew Holiday tonight.
Yeah, Hill's interesting. You do wonder about the ceiling, right? He averaged 0.72 DraftKings points per minute last year. So that's a pretty subpar mark for a point guard. But at 3,500, I don't know if that matters. He'll probably approach 28, 30 minutes tonight, something like that. And when you're talking about a player priced at just 3,500, that volume is more than enough to make up for any sort of, ceiling deficiency that he may have on a per minute basis. So the ownership on him doesn't look out of control. We're showing 34% projected ownership on DraftKings. I'm fine with being overweight on that. I probably have him in closer to like 50% of my lineups, I think, just because it is hard to find, some of these value plays if you want to go with a stars and scrubs type approach.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of these 3-game slates, the stars and scrubs approach is generally what we want to be looking at. And we already have Jordan Nwora as a really excellent value option today on DraftKings and FanDuel. And by getting to a lot of Jordan Nwora and George Hill, I think a lot of people might look at a slate like last night, for instance, where we had a whole bunch of cheap plays go off and score, 30, 40 fantasy points. There's a lot of mispriced players, particularly on DraftKings last night. We're not going to need that same kind of production today from George Hill to land in the optimal lineup. If you look at our projections right now, we have George Hill being in the optimal lineup 33% of the time on DraftKings. And at a 3,500 price tag, it's pretty reasonable to think that he could score 18 to 20 fantasy points and land in the optimal lineup, not because of what he does individually, But if there's big games from Giannis, a big game from Steph Curry, a big game from Luka Doncic, you're probably going to need stars in those lineups. And that's where I think that George Hill, because you mentioned his ceiling, I agree with you. I don't think George Hill has much ceiling, but it's the other guys on the slate that do have substantial ceilings.
Right.
And I'm trying to find how to jam them in as many ways as possible. So like, what do you think is the lowest number of fantasy points we could see George Hill score and still land an optimal lineup?
18. 18 would be the absolute floor minimum. I think like 25 is a more realistic number. And I think 25 is within his range of outcomes tonight. So, his ceiling, even if it's only 30 points, that would be very okay at 3,500.
Yeah.
You will take that when it allows you to get in Giannis or Steph or whatever combination of studs you want to play with him.
Yeah, and once again, my standpoint here, because I see some people saying, bringing up George Hill in the YouTube chat and talking about how much George Hill sucks and all that and isn't the best fantasy producer. His road to landing the optimal lineup isn't him having a big game. It's just the stars on the slate having a big game and us needing to find that salary savings.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that too, because when we last saw George Hill with the Bucks, he was playing over Eric Bledsoe in playoff games. Now, granted, Eric Bledsoe might suck too, and probably does. But like George Hill, he can knock down open shots and playing alongside Giannis, that's all you need to do. We didn't see a lot of George Hill last year because he was buried with the Thunder. He got hurt. Then he ended up in a weird situation in Philly. Like, I'm not ready to say that George Hill sucks because he had a subpar year last year.
No, and he's not the best fantasy producer in the world, especially from a points per minute perspective. But I think given the lack of depth the Bucks have for tonight's game with Drew Holiday out, and Brook Lopez shouldn't, you would think, directly impact the minutes from George Hill, but that then means the Bucks just have to play smaller lineups. Those minutes have to be filled somewhere. So I do think that George Hill is a fairly high floor at the very least. One other guard I really want to ask you about is Jordan Poole for tonight, who only played 25 minutes in the first game of the season. However, he did have to briefly leave with an injury, and that impacted his minutes a little bit. What really stood out to me about Jordan Poole on opening night, 31.9% usage rate. We saw from last year down the tail stretch of the year, massive usage rate whenever he got the opportunity to play extended minutes. So I really like Jordan Poole today. I'm overweight to the field on him, but how much of what we saw from him from a usage perspective on opening night do you think is replicable today?
I think it's, certainly that was towards the high side of what you can expect from Jordan Poole, but he could be a 25% usage guy while Klay Thompson is sidelined. They are looking for scoring options next to Steph Curry. Yes, they have Andrew Wiggins. You kind of know what you're going to get from him. But other than that, there are no scorers on this team. Draymond Green has become such a drain offensively with his lack of scoring that it's like if the guy scores double-digit points now, it's a surprise. So they need guys like Poole who can get buckets, and to a lesser extent, I would throw Damian Lee in that conversation as well.
Yeah, and that's Draymond Green has been popularly called a triple single player over on on Twitter, which low usage guy, and that's something also you look at what the Warriors lineup is. We've got Steph Curry and also Jordan Poole. They staggered his minutes with Steph Curry a lot. That was something a lot of people have brought up was if Jordan Poole is going to start, who's going to take the usage in the second unit? Well, Jordan Poole just went to the bench 5-6 minutes into the first quarter. He comes and he plays in the second unit when Steph Curry comes out. And that's one of the other reasons the usage is so high was because they staggered those minutes with Steph Curry. Ultimately, something that I think is going to help his fantasy production this year. But any other point guards that you really want to bring up that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Hero's kind of interesting. I thought he would check in with a lower ownership projection than he has. Right now, we have Hero projected for, let's see here. Sorry, still learning the.
All good.
We have Hero.
I could pull it up right here. Also,
yeah, I'm not finding it.
Yeah, I want to refresh the ownership anyway because there might have been an update since we've started doing the show, and I want to make sure that I'm looking at the most recent information. There's not been an ownership update yet, but so Tyler Hero right now on DraftKings projected for 20.5% ownership. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for 21.7% ownership, so fairly consistent across both sites. Looking at a guy right around 20%. That's actually very close to where I have him right now. I have him. Let's see. I am Slightly overweight to him on FanDuel, on DraftKings, also very slightly overweight. I have him in 25% of my lineups. So not any kind of crazy stand on Tyler Hero, but I am a little bit overweight to him.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to be the guy who's touting preseason numbers, right? That's not the guy I want to be. But if you look at what he did during the preseason, he had 3 games with over 41 and a half DraftKings points. We saw this guy play really well in the playoffs 2 years ago as a 19-year-old. Like, he's good. I think he's good at basketball. Whether or not his head is completely in basketball, that's a different conversation for a different show. But I think Tyler Hero, talent-wise, has the talent to pay off this price tag. I think 20% is probably a pretty fair number for him. I might be a little bit higher than that. I might be closer to like 30%, just because I do kind of believe in his scoring ability. With Victor Oladipo sidelined, they're kind of going to need a little bit more out of him than they might at other times down the stretch. So Hero's somebody that is kind of popping for me.
Yep, totally reasonable. I could get behind that. And like I said, I'm slightly overweight to him. By the way, something we have to bring up here, Matt, you might not know this. We have a partnership with Yahoo Daily Fantasy. And this is one of the better deals we've ever offered anybody who's been watching the YouTube shows. Because if you go and you're a new customer over at Yahoo Daily Fantasy, make a deposit using the link in the description box below. You sign up, you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That's all you need to do. Sign up in the link, make a deposit, enter some contests, and you get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And we have all the tools you need to win some money over at Yahoo DFS. We've got ownership projections. We've got fantasy projections. Also, those lineups can be uploaded right into a Fantasy Cruncher. And now there's CSV upload over at Yahoo. So take advantage of that. Use the link in the description box below. Sign up as a new user over at Yahoo and get yourself 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All right, let's move over to the shooting guard position. Now, once again, because of the wonkiness of how the point guard and shooting guards are now both on DraftKings and FanDuel, we've kind of talked about most of the players already that are shooting guards here, because they also have point guard eligibility, a lot of them. But some guys that don't, that I think are important plays to talk about on the slate. One being Jimmy Butler, who is priced pretty favorably over on. Does he have? Well, he's a small forward on DraftKings, but a shooting guard on FanDuel. But I guess we can talk about him here. $8,300 on DraftKings, $9,100 on FanDuel. So Jimmy Butler, I think that we should expect, at least when he's healthy, to start the year, big minutes from Jimmy Butler. Also, I don't buy too much into narratives. However, opening day, we've got Jimmy Butler going up against the Bucks team that just knocked him out of the playoffs. I think that we're going to see a version of Jimmy Butler that wants to push his minutes, really extend his minutes, and try to take as much usage as possible. Also still acclimating Kyle Lowry into the lineup. Not exactly sure how that's going to go, but at least off the bat, I'm expecting pretty big minutes from Jimmy Butler. And with this being the first game of the season for the Heat, I did give him a couple more minutes than I probably would have in other situations. But is Jimmy Butler somebody you're getting to today?
For sure. I think this is a great price tag for Butler on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it's a little less appealing, but Butler, I mean, he was limited last year. He only played in 52 regular season games because of injuries, but you could make a case that was the best year of his career. 21 and a half points per game, 7 assists, 7 rebounds. Essentially, he was tied for the league in steals per game. And just like a really good fantasy play on essentially a nightly basis. He was 1.33 DraftKings points per minute. Yes, they brought in Kyle Lowry. That probably lowers his ceiling a touch. Maybe he doesn't need to do absolutely everything for the team this season, but I still think it's Jimmy Butler's team, right? There's no question who's going to be their top guy. And maybe now he doesn't have to defer, like he can be a little bit more aggressive as a scorer. There were times last year when Butler was too passive, if anything. So maybe now that Lowry's there, Butler can slide into a little bit more of an offensive role. Just don't shoot any threes, Jimmy. Try to keep those, try to save those for blowout time.
And by the way, one other thing that I think is kind of a little bit of an important narrative heading into the season, Jimmy Butler said in the offseason that with Kyle Lowry at point guard, they're going to play at a faster pace this year. He expects them to be a faster paced team. And this was a team that was brutally slow at points in time last year. So I do think this is a team that with Kyle Lowry point guard, who will push the pace at times. We saw the Toronto Raptors as one of the higher paced teams in the league last year. I think we're going to see him set the tone for the Heat and make them a little bit of a faster paced team this season. So I think we're going to see some higher scoring Miami games, which should benefit the fantasy production for everybody here. Once again, somebody else, Paul George, shooting guard on FanDuel, also has small forward eligibility. DraftKings, he doesn't have shooting guard eligibility, just small forward eligibility. But I'm not really getting to Paul George. We've talked about all the stars that are on the slate, and there's a lot of them to choose from. I have to make the cut somewhere. I'm underweight to the field on Trae Young. I'm going to be underweight to the field on Paul George as well. I understand there's a big usage bump coming his way to open the season with Kawhi Leonard out, and that could be a permanent thing this season. Kawhi Leonard, if the Clippers struggle, he might not play at all this year. So I think Paul George is in for a big fantasy season. But relative to his price point and the other stars we have to pay up for here, I'm just not able to really get him into a lot of my lineups. But do you feel any differently with Paul George?
Yeah, I don't. I'm underweight on Paul George too. I think that if we were to get, like the full Paul George experience, like we saw in the playoffs last year with no Kawhi, then you could be interested in him at his current price tag. But the Clippers are kind of notorious for not pushing their players. Like we've seen Paul George and Kawhi Leonard get the kid gloves treatment in the past. So I don't feel great that we're going to see Paul George put, the Superman cape on tonight. I think that the usage bump might be a little bit overstated to start the year. So I'm with you. I think Paul George is a great player. We saw in the playoffs just how high his ceiling can be without Kawhi Leonard. But I think it's important to keep in mind that those were playoff games. And this is the first regular season game of a 72-game season.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable to think, is that the Clippers could be doing what they could to stay healthy. And maybe we don't see Paul George go out and play, 36, 37 minutes to open the season. We do have a super chat here from D Owens 89 who's saying, do Butler, Paul George, and Giannis Antetokounmpo count as three studs in a lineup? I mean, it's a little bit irrelevant. You could call them studs if you want. They're all all-star. They're all all-star level players. It's, for me, when I kind of consider stars and scrubs build for today, I'm considering more two of the three of Giannis, Luka Doncic, and Steph Curry into lineups. But I mean, they're all three all-stars. They're studs in their own right. But when I'm talking stars and scrubs builds, I'm generally talking about Giannis, Luka, and Steph Curry relative to this slate. As far as anybody else who has shooting guard eligibility, I want to ask you about somebody, because you've already said you think this guy might suck. I'm getting to him in a decent amount of my lineups, particularly on FanDuel, and that's Eric Bledsoe. Bledsoe is going to start for the Clippers to open up the season, and the situation for him with the Pelicans was not ideal. Floor spacing wasn't great, and that's a situation I don't think you generally want Eric Bledsoe in, is in a spot where he kind of is forced to be a floor spacer. But now he's going to be on this Clippers team with a starting lineup that's expected to be Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, Paul George, Marcus Morris, and Ivica Zubac to open up the season. And I think we could see Eric Bledsoe, particularly at a $4,500 price tag on FanDuel. I think his salary goes up from here, and he's somebody who is actually one of my favorite value plays over on FanDuel. But you've already said you think this guy sucks, so could you talk me out of him?
I mean, there's not much to talk out of at 4,500. I would advise against him heavily at 6K on DraftKings, but you have to ask yourself how big of an outlier last season was for Bledsoe. Like, he's a guy that has been a fantasy, not a stud, but certainly like a very good fantasy player in the past. We've seen him operate as the third option in Milwaukee and put up 40 plus fantasy points per game. So certainly you would think that a role with the Clippers, who are, shorthanded without Serge Ibaka, without Kawhi Leonard, like, you would think that he could thrive in that role. But we saw him get minutes at times last year with the Pelicans and it not work out. So I'm a little scared of him, but certainly like 4,500, he could play upwards of 30 minutes tonight. It's hard to fight too hard against a guy who fits that criteria.
Yeah, and once again, he's cheap. And another thing too is we got a message here. Josh from Los Angeles, Awesemo member, said, I have too much Bledsoe. I might need CPR. Listen, anybody who's listened to our channel now for the last year and a half, they know that I'm a Bledsoe defender. Now, last year I just took the L on. I was like, all right, he sucked last year. But Eric Bledsoe, this guy like owes me a car for the DFS exposure I've gotten to him that hasn't worked out. But I'm going right back to the well because he's in a different situation. It's like I'm getting back together with my ex. I could kind of talk myself into
It'll
it.
work
Things
out
are
for
going to
you
be
this time.
yeah, things are going to be different this time. And it's the Arrested Development meme where it's did it work out for everybody else? No, but maybe it will for us. But it's just me again falling for the same pitfall over and over again. So I'm going to be on Eric Bledsoe here, at least on FanDuel. DraftKings versus FanDuel, by the way, totally different story. He's only 4,500 on FanDuel, which makes him more desirable there. I saw somebody say that we have a Maverick starting lineup, but I don't see that yet in our Discord channel. But when we do get that posted from News God, I will bring that up on the show. But anybody else here that you want to talk about from shooting guard position? If not, we could move over to the small forwards.
Yeah, I think Grayson Allen's going to be pretty chalky tonight. Certainly no problems going back to him after his opening night performance. Reggie Jackson on FanDuel at 5K. Like, your Eric Bledsoe is my Reggie Jackson. I will always play Reggie Jackson at 5K. And as much as I made fun of Andrew Wiggins, like, less than 6K for Andrew Wiggins is a pretty good price tag. If he gets his 20 points and 3 rebounds and 2 assists, like, we can live with that at 5,900. So he does have the ceiling for a 40 plus game. Like, Wiggins is a guy that I'm considering on DraftKings at 5,900.
I didn't quite get to him just because of the minutes restriction. I'm not exactly sure what we're getting from him from a playing time perspective right now. Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green, both of them on opening night, we were told before the game that they were going to play limited minutes by Steve Kerr. He ultimately only ended up playing 26 minutes. Foul trouble is also an issue there. I only gave Andrew Wiggins 28 minutes tonight. And if he goes beyond that, I can't say I would be shocked. But just given that he's apparently not fully conditioned to play full minutes, I'm not really getting to him. But there's certainly ceiling for him to play more minutes and then have a big game. But just at least for today, I wasn't able to get to him based on how I'm evaluating him. But I want to ask you, we got a question in our Discord channel from Charles487. He's asking, could Winslow be a decent value play on DraftKings? He's asking for a double up. For cash games, no, don't play Justice Winslow. For tournament, I think we could have a little bit more of a discussion about Justice Winslow, just as being a low-owned punt play to get to. Tournaments, absolutely don't play Justice Winslow. We have George Hill to choose from. We have Jordan Noir to roster. There's a whole bunch of value plays that are safer than Justice Winslow. But if we want to talk about him as a guy who's maybe off the radar to play in tournaments, he's only projected for 8% ownership. We have him with a 9% chance to land in the optimal lineup. He's not making it into my lineups personally. But if you needed to take a crazy punt for tournaments, I think you could do worse. But any Justice Winslow interest for you?
Not really. It's one thing to play a guy who's not going to see a ton of minutes if you think they have excellent per minute upside, but Winslow has not really been that. He was 0.75 DraftKings points per minute during the regular season. During the preseason. That doesn't mean he can't improve, but I think that there are better spots. Like, would you? I mean, I know Terrence Mann will have more ownership, but like, I'd rather go with Terrence Mann for the extra 1,000. I think.
Yeah,
and certainly we mentioned Reggie Jackson and Eric Bledsoe.
Yeah. And yeah, it's Justice Winslow. If you're playing 150 lineups, I think you can make a case for getting to 5 to 10% of Justice Winslow. But in one lineup, I wouldn't go make that stand. Now we do have the starting lineup out for the Dallas Mavericks. We got the news god El Negro Loco we posted in our premium Discord channel. We got Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, Kristaps Porzingis, Dwight Powell. So no real surprises there. Anything that stands out to you about that starting lineup or that changes anything you thought about this slate?
No, I think that's pretty much what I was expecting. I heard some of the guys on the earlier show talking about Dwight Powell. I think he's kind of, an interesting player. We'll talk about him when we get to the big men. But other than that, yeah, there's nothing really to take away from me.
All right, we got a super chat here from Mark Baptiste. And Reggie Jackson or Chris Middleton on DraftKings, well, they're in different salary ranges, so I don't really know what the opportunity cost is there. But Chris Middleton, if you're just choosing between the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie Jackson is a little bit more expensive, I want to say, on DraftKings, but Middleton for sure.
Is Reggie Jackson more expensive than Middleton today?
No, he's like, I want to say he's 67 versus
he's 6,700, Middleton 73.
Yeah.
So yeah, Middleton at 7,300. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if there's any kind of crazy opportunity cost associated with that, then maybe. But I think that Chris Middleton's a better play today than Reggie Jackson, particularly with Drew Holiday out for the Bucks today. But let's move on over, and any other small forwards here that we really want to be talking about. DeAndre Hunter is somebody who's making it into some of my lineups. He's going to be starting for the Atlanta Hawks today. There's no Danilo Gallinari in the lineup for the Hawks today. We also have Clint Capella on a minutes restriction, which could be more small ball lineups for Atlanta. So I think DeAndre Hunter, while not being somebody who's a core play for me, he's somebody I have in about a third of my lineups. Did you take any real stand with DeAndre Hunter?
Yeah, I really like DeAndre Hunter. I have him in more than a third of my lineups. I just think he's a good player. We didn't see a ton of him last year. You know, he was battling injuries, but I do think that with Gallo out, with Capella limited, like there's an opportunity for him to, you know, see 34, 35 minutes tonight. I like him quite a bit. Obviously, we have Nwora. I think he's going to draw like the vast majority of the ownership here. And if you want to get weird, I think my get weird play on the slate is going to be Otto Porter. I'm going back to the well with Otto. His salary dropped $1,000 on DraftKings. He went from 5,300 to 4,300. The minutes were not what we expected, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to be an every game thing. You know, the Warriors rode Bielitsa. He was hot in that game. It would not shock me if Porter returns to a closer to 20-minute role tonight. I think that that's within the range of outcomes. And we know that this guy is very good on a per minute basis. So I'm willing to buy the dip on Otto Porter. That's what, if the Bitcoin bros have taught me anything, it's that you always buy the dip.
I get it from an extent. Here's where I understand it. I was really heavy on Otto Porter in the first game of the season. And this isn't even a thing where I look at it and say, I don't want to roster Otto Porter today because he sucked for me on opening day, because he didn't actually suck when he was on the court. The minutes just weren't there. He played 11 minutes and scored 10 fantasy points. So if he played the minutes I thought he was going to play, which was somewhere in mid upper 20s, he would have still been a good value play. But I just can't get there when I see that little amount of minutes going towards him. From that game. There's also a whole bunch of forwards that I liked for cheap today. Let's see, where is Otto Porter? And so I assume he's not picking up much ownership, so that's something that would definitely play in his favor. Yeah, only 1% projected ownership for him today on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings.
All my lineups.
Yeah, all your
Matt
lineups.
Lamarca 1% across the board.
Sub 1% for him on DraftKings. So from that standpoint, it's not difficult to get overweights to the field on him, but I ultimately didn't end up getting exposure to him, mostly just because I don't think the minutes are going to be there. But if you do think the rotation is going to look different, then it's certainly something that could be more favorable towards him. But I'll ask you then, where do you think those minutes come from? Is it Bielitsa who sees less playing time?
That would be my guess. Yeah.
Okay.
I like Bielitsa too. Like, I think he's a good player. I think what he fits with what the Warriors want to do, which is, pace and space and shoot threes. But like, Porter is just, I don't know. To me, he's too talented to be a 10th man on the Warriors right now. Especially with Wiggins playing reduced minutes, with Draymond playing limited minutes, with no Wiseman. Like, I think he's better than that. So I'm willing to take one more stab. And if I get burnt again, I get burnt again.
I like Otto Porter. I thought that was at least at the time, I thought that was the best signing of the offseason. The Warriors got him for almost nothing. And then I'm all hyped up. I'm like, look at Otto Porter on opening day. Cheap price. Andrew Wiggins limited minutes. Draymond Green limited minutes. I think it's Otto Porter who's going to step up. Ultimately, it was the right process with the wrong player. It was Bielitsa that ended up getting into that role. And I know that I think it might have been Eric who was on him. And I took the other side there with Otto Porter. And I took a big fat L on that one. But it's something that there's a lot of value plays, in particular Jordan Nwora, who, if anybody is wondering if they didn't watch earlier, Matt and I already talked about him. Both of us think that he is the top value play to look at on this slate. He looks under-owned in all the tools on the site. So I'm going to be very heavy on Jordan Nwora. I didn't really see a need to get to Otto Porter, but stab in GPP for low ownership, I think that is definitely sensible. We can move over to the power forwards. And once again, a lot of these guys we've kind of touched on as we talked about the small forwards, because Jordan Nwora also has power forward eligibility. Giannis, we talked about him. Both of us agreed that he was our favorite pay-up option on the slate. So I guess the next guy who's making it into my lineups that I want to bring up with you is Kristaps Porzingis, because I'm of the belief that Porzingis is going to have an all-star caliber season this year. I think last year he was coming back from an injury. He struggled a little bit. He never really got into rhythm. He was terrible by the time the playoffs rolled around. But somebody who, at least in the preseason, not that we have to look into the actual outcomes in terms of fantasy production preseason, but he looked healthy, which as far as Kristaps Porzingis goes, that is a very key factor to look at. He still has all the talent in the world. Also on FanDuel, his ability to block shots is something that plays really well when they're worth 3 points as opposed to 2. So I'm going to be pretty heavy on Kristaps Porzingis right now. I have him in a ton of my best ball leagues. What do you make of Porzingis this year?
Yeah, he's going to be great until he inevitably gets hurt at some point. That's kind of what I believe. They've been saying all the right things about getting him more involved in the offense. He was fantastic during the preseason. You mentioned the defensive stats. He knocked down some threes. Overall, it was 1.6 DraftKings points per minute, albeit over a small sample size. I think that his ceiling is significantly higher than his current price tag indicates. The only thing is I don't like, I like him a lot, but I also really like John Collins, and he's now 6,800. He's a little bit cheaper. Collins saw a pretty nice boost with Capella off the court last season. So if you think that Collins plays some small ball 5 in this game, I think that he becomes like maybe a smidge more appealing for me.
Okay. Yeah, I could see the logic for that, especially it's going to depend on how many minutes Clint Capella plays. He's expected to be on a minutes restriction. I assume when Clint Capella isn't on the court, John Collins is going to play those center minutes. What do you think we're going to see out of Clint Capella from a playing time perspective, given that the Hawks are easing him into the season a little bit?
Yeah, it scares me. I'm not going to lie. Like Capella is a guy that will play limited minutes anyway sometimes. So when the team comes out and says he's going to play limited minutes, I think, like 26, 28, maybe a best case scenario type of thing. He was somebody that I really liked, and now he's like basically off the board for me.
Yeah, the reason I think that it was just important to bring him up with John Collins, there's the less that Clint Capella plays, the more John Collins plays center, and that's favorable towards him. It's easy to forget because of how good John Collins was in the playoffs. He kind of sucked for fantasy for most of the regular season. Nobody was playing John Collins at the end of the season, beginning of the season. A lot of us were playing John Collins. He just sucked a bunch of games in a row to the point where all of us stopped playing him. If we're going to see Clint Capella play 28 to 30 minutes, that could really mean bad things for John Collins. But I think the upside is there just from the standpoint of Clint Capella is expected to be on a minutes restriction. We did get another Hawks-related super chat here from Darren Anderson, who's asking, is Lou Williams a good GBB play on DK at 4,100? In my opinion, no. But do you have a different opinion, Matt?
No. Lou gave the Hawks something in the playoffs last year, but last year was kind of an unmitigated disaster for him during the regular season. So if he was, 3,300 maybe, but at 4,100, we kind of need him to get like 30 plus to be a ceiling type play. And I don't see that.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with him as well. Actually, I'm not even sure he's going to get any minutes at all today. So to me, somebody who I'm not interested in. We do have some questions here to hit on from our guy, Charles487 in our premium Discord channel. He's asking, now that Dwight Powell is starting, does it make sense to roster him? I have Dwight Powell in, let's see, where am I at on Dwight Powell? I have Dwight Powell in 20% of my lineups. Once again, he's cheap. He's starting. Last year was a little bit of a down year for him, but it's hard to know, is he washed because he had the Achilles injury, or was he just working himself back from the Achilles injury? But it's a 3-game slate. He's starting. He's a good enough fantasy producer. That has me getting to exposure to Dwight Powell. And then he also asked was it him or was it somebody else asked, Powell or Isaiah Hartenstein? So we could group these guys together. So what do you make of Dwight Powell? And would you rather have Dwight Powell or Isaiah Hartenstein if you're playing one lineup?
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? And it's kind of one of the overarching questions that we kind of have to ask ourselves as DFS players. Sometimes it's, what do we value more? Do we value the minutes or do we value the point per minute upside? But I think that the fact that Powell looked better to me during the preseason. He looked kind of healthier than he did last year. He only averaged 0.89 DraftKings points per minute last season. That was up to 1.24 during the postseason or the preseason. If he can go back to being that guy, because Powell has been that guy in the past. If he can get back to that level, then we have the possible combination of minutes and point per minute efficiency. So I think Powell is my preferred target here. I like Hartenstein too. Don't get me wrong. He was like a monster at times during the preseason, but I think Powell, to answer your question, I don't think he's done. So I'm willing to sort of take the plunge with him.
Yeah, I have fairly similar exposure to Dwight Powell and Isaiah Hartenstein. I have a few more Hartenstein lineups, but ultimately I don't have an issue with either of them as plays. If you were asking me which one to play in a single entry, I would say Hartenstein because he's who I have more exposure to, but I don't think you could go wrong with either one of them. Another question we had in here regarding the Bucks is $4 too much in any one lineup? No, not in my opinion. I don't have an issue getting to $4. I think it's where all the best value is on the slate. Also, I think Giannis is the best pay up option, so that's no real issue for me. And then we have a question here from Scoops Cote, which I think this is a pretty interesting talking point. Should we be staying away from Hartenstein and Zubats in the same lineup? So I think individually, Zubats and Hartenstein both make for really good plays. I think ideally you don't want to have them in the same lineup. However, it's a 3-game slate, and I think the two of them are two of the better value options on DK. So even if it's not something I think is ideal, I'm still ending up with some lineups where I have the two of them together. But is that something you'd be actively avoiding today, Matt?
I think it would be. I think if you look at Zubac's, his correlations, he's got a pretty negative correlation with Ibaka historically. I would imagine that carries over to Hartenstein. They haven't played a ton of games together, obviously, but I just don't see a situation where they both eat. So I would kind of keep it to an either or situation. But if you wanted to go with a few lineups here and there, I don't think it would be too much. Like if you're doing 150, if you wanted to have 5 with both players, that'd be fine. But you might be underweight to the field if you only have 5 out of 150 combinations there. So my answer is I would rather not have both of them.
Yeah, if this was a bigger slate, I'd probably set a rule in Fantasy Cruncher to not allow me to get them in the same lineup together. But given the size of the slate, in Hartenstein's only 3,100. He's a really good points minute fantasy producer. It's not out of the realm of possibility. He plays 16 minutes. He scores 20 fantasy points and lands in the optimal lineup. So to me, I don't have an issue with the two of them together. One, because Hartenstein's nearly been priced, and then number 2, just the size of the slate. But in general, that would be a no for me. But on this slate, I'm okay making an exception for it. Rum Ham is asking us for our opinions on Marcus Morris. I do think that Marcus Morris is probably going to start for the Clippers today, but I'm not getting to him because I think there's a chance that he opens the season on a minutes restriction. We've seen Ty Lue talk about that a little bit in the media. So I only gave Marcus Morris 24 minutes today. That's also another reason that I think that we could see less minutes of him at center. That would benefit something like Zubats and Hartenstein. So I'm personally not getting to Marcus Morris today. However, I do think he could have a big fantasy year with Kawhi out. I don't think it's going to come out of the gate. But where do you stand on Marcus Morris today?
He's interesting, right? He does have some upside. We have him at 11.3% from a boom percentage in our boom bust tool. That's not bad. There are definitely players lower than him percentage wise who are going to be popular tonight. Grayson Allen being one example, Hunter being an example. Like Morris has some upside, right? He is not shy about shooting the ball when he is on the floor, and there will be shots available for the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard. But I do think that he's got a wide range of outcomes. So I have Morris in some of my teams. I will try to be overweight on the field. We have him projected for about 12% on DraftKings. So I will have more than that, but I don't think it's going to be more than like 20% or so.
All right. And I also want to address, because we did have some questions in the YouTube chat about when we're going to be doing the NFL stream. The NFL stream, that's also going to be on the YouTube channel. But after the show is over, also all the more reason, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you know when all of our content goes live. But yeah, we're still going to have, as shitty as that football game is, we're still going to be covering on the YouTube channel. And I'll be talking about whether to play the third string running back on the Browns, the fourth string running back, played none of the running backs on the Browns. That'll all be covered after this. Also, I have to bring this up, guys, because we have a special deal going on only through October 25th. Celebrate the start of the NBA season. We have a tip-off deal for NBA that will get all new Awesemo Plus members 50% off their first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Use the promo code Curry at checkout on the link in the description box below, and that will get you 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. That is using the promo code Curry that offers only valid through Monday, October 25th. So if you guys want to sign up, go take advantage of that promo offer now. Let's hit on some of these centers now. And once again, we've hit on a lot of these guys in passing. We just hit on Dwight Powell. We talked about Clint Capella and his minutes restriction. We've talked about Zubats and Hartenstein. Giannis, he is center eligibility. But we haven't hit on Bam Adebayo yet. And he's somebody who rates out really favorably in our projections. Bam Adebayo is actually one of the top overall leverage plays in our most recent run of ownership, where over on DraftKings, he's projected for 39% ownership. We have him landing in the optimal lineup 44.7% of the time. Over on FanDuel, he lands in the optimal lineup 55% of the time. So he is the second most positive leverage player on FanDuel, only behind Jordan Nwora. I'm a little bit lower on Bam Adebayo than what our projections show, but he's still somebody who's making it into a good chunk of my lineups. Bam Adebayo, how do you think he's going to fit in with these new look Heat?
It's a good question. It's an important question. He did, for what it's worth, again, preseason stats. He posted an above average usage rate for him during the preseason. The thing that's so great about Adebayo is he can get his fantasy points in a number of ways, right? He's a great passer for a big man. He can get the defensive stats. He can hit the boards. So even if he does see a lower usage rate, I don't know if that necessarily kills him as far as his fantasy upside. He's that well-rounded. 7,600 on DraftKings seems extremely fair for him. You mentioned he's popping in the optimal nearly 50% of the time on DraftKings. He's a core play for me tonight. I really like him. And I think that he could even check in with kind of lower ownership than expected, just because there is such a dearth. Is dearth good? Dearth is like there's a lot of, right? There's a dearth of value options at center that I think people might gravitate towards.
Yeah, I always say girth, but that's different. But yeah, dearth. That's a wide range of options there. Good vocab word from.
Thank you.
Yeah, from like sophomore year of high school. Only a couple minutes to lock, and we got a couple more super chats that came in, so I want to make sure we hit on these. Corey Bomber's asking, Bielitsa, Mann, or Pat Connaughton for the last man into a DK lineup. Let me see who I have projected the highest of that group. I'm pretty sure it's Terrence Mann, but let me double check to make sure that is the case. Yeah, it's Terrence Mann for me. Bielitsa was great in the first game of the season. Like Matt, I don't totally buy into the minutes we saw, and I think we could see Otto Porter play a little bit more, but I'm fairly high on Terrence Mann entering the season, especially with Kawhi Leonard out. So I'll read those names to you again, Matt. It was Bielitsa, Terrence Mann, Pat Connaughton. If you had to pick one of those, who would be your choice?
It's Mann for me as well. I do think it's interesting that Bielitsa went off and nobody's going to play him tonight. I think he's going to be basically unowned again. So maybe if you like, that's the contrarian play, is to go back to the well with Bielitsa. But for me, it's Mann.
All right. And then Arca Felza, he's asking us a 2v2 question for DK single entry. He is asking Dwight Powell and Reggie Jackson, or Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jalen Brunson. Well, first of all, a lot of players I don't like in that combination. And I can't tell you to remake your lineup. We've only got like 90 seconds to go into lock, and it's not even including the time lapse here. But of those players, the one that I like the most is Dwight Powell. I think Reggie Jackson's a little bit too expensive on DraftKings, but I don't really love Jalen Brunson or Tim Hardaway Jr. But if you had to pick one of these combinations, Matt, are you going with Dwight Powell and Reggie Jackson, or Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jalen Brunson?
Definitely the Powell and and Reggie Jackson combo. I'm with you that Jackson's too expensive, but Powell being cheap kind of makes up for it in a way. I don't know. Like I may have too much Reggie Jackson in my lineups, guys. It's just, he was the Clippers' number 2 offensive option last year. And I don't see why that changes now that they're the same team that they were in the playoffs. So I do like Reggie Jackson.
I have bad news. You used dearth incorrectly. It's the opposite. Dearth is a lack of options, not too many options. So
I was either way. I had a 50-50 chance and I just went for it.
Yeah, it could have been something else. I'm like, no, dearth is a pirate ship, but at least you were kind of you're on the right page in terms of, roundabout what dearth is. But what do we got here? A bunch of vocab nerds here in the YouTube chat. So we knew what he was talking about. Maybe, I don't know. I just went along with it. I was like, yeah, that's what dearth is.
Yeah, it's good work.
Yeah, what am I going to do to correct you? So we've only got 1 minute to go here until we start. I'm getting people are adding me in Discord, but there's no text attached to it, so I don't know what the question is. I'll have to figure out what's going on with that. But that aside, coming up after us, guys, we do have the NFL show. It's going to be breaking down the ever exciting Browns-Broncos game, the most anticipated football game of the season. So you're going to want to check that out. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel so we know when that goes live. Also, go follow Matt LaMarca on Twitter. It's his first show with us. He's been doing a lot more, and really looking forward to working with him more. So good luck today, guys, and I will see you soon.